the green room for a number of reasons, I'm told. First of all, just I think it's where she prefers him to be, so she doesn't catch his eye and try to think, is he trying to send me a signal of some sort? But from his perspective, it's because he's so invested in this, he doesn't want to be seen on camera doing anything that, you know, he shouldn't be doing in terms of his reaction to how things are going.
And we saw him walking in. We'll see if he's going to be introduced, Bill Clinton and Melania Trump. Those are the two spouses of these two presidential candidates.
Yeah, I mean, and we talk about how Hillary Clinton is the first female to head a major party presidential ticket. In addition to the unprecedented nature of Donald Trump, we also have the fact that a first spouse would be a former president, something that we have never seen in this country before.
And then after that, we're going to be hearing from Lester Holt, the NBC News anchor, who's the moderator of this debate. The pressure is enormous on him.
Enormous on him, and you know, he obviously has been, as the debate commission co-chair said, keeping his own counsel. But one thing that I thought was really fascinating, and it's important for our viewers to remember, is that when they start, they're each going to speak for 2 minutes, but then there will be a time when Lester Holt is going to pull back. It's in the rules, and the two of them are going to actually debate. They're going to go at it. They're going to have 10 minutes to go, you know, sort of head-to-head in whatever way they want, on whatever issue they want. And so that, I think, is going to be so telling as to how they interact with one another, what topics they choose to use, and the kind of tone and tenor that they take with one another.
And I'm curious to see if this crowd here will remain silent. You heard the warning, no applause, maybe when they're all introduced at the beginning, at the very end. But I'm curious if the 1,100 people here, a lot of partisans, are going to heed that advice.
That's right. I mean, the debate hall here at Hofstra University is full, but you heard the co-chairs of the Presidential Commission, the Commission on Presidential Debates, really admonish them, keep it quiet. This is not a primary debate. This is not a caucus debate. Have respect for the two individuals on the stage.
Anderson, we're only moments away from the start of this debate.
That's right. 8 minutes, 30 seconds or so. Let's get some final thoughts from our panelists. Just David, in terms of a cheat sheet for viewers at home, what are you going to be watching for? What do you encourage them to?
Well, I think we've everybody's set up the parameters. How does Trump do in terms of the sort of basic mastery and temperament test? And does Hillary Clinton connect? Those are going to be the connect in a very human way and give people a sense of her motivation. Those are going to be the things that I'm going to be looking for. And then, you know, the non-linear things, the reaction shots, how someone reacts to an unexpected...
The moments.
Those moments that we talked about before, yeah.
You know, it's a magnifying glass for them when you have that split screen. And we're on a large panel here. Not everybody's looking at every time we yawn or roll our eyes or whatever. And I think that this is something that's difficult for someone to master if you really haven't been constantly under that kind of scrutiny before. Donald Trump was on a panel of 16 or 17 other candidates. Hillary Clinton has been there before. She knows how to do this, and it'll be interesting to see Donald Trump and perform.
Yeah. And how they see the electorate and how they're trying to reach out to particular segments of the electorate. College-educated white women, for instance, for Donald Trump. He's struggling with those folks. And Bernie Sanders supporters. I mean, a lot of those supporters are parked in those third-party slots with Gary Johnson and Jill Stein. Are they going to reach out to those folks? Because that is what I think is really limiting Hillary Clinton's ability at this point to pull away.
Michael?
Themes have carried him thus far. Jeffrey is right to say that was Roger Ailes' advice to Reagan in '84 before the Mondale debate. But the rules have changed. And as we've discussed extensively here, these 15-minute pods, I want to see the final 30 minutes. And I want to know, what does he still have in his tank to speak with specificity on the issues? If he can do that, it'll be a good night for Donald Trump. Otherwise, it'll be a better night for Hillary.
Jeffrey?
He's got television skills, and I think that's going to play a real role in this. She does not. She's just been a political figure. I think that could play a role in this, and I expect him to do very well with it.
I'm looking for that connection moment. I think sometimes we underestimate Donald Trump. We recall when Ted Cruz had the New York values line of attack, and Donald Trump flattened that when he talked about 9/11 and his experience and how New Yorkers rose to the occasion. I think we're going to see that Donald Trump come out tonight very strong.
Van? I hope Hillary Clinton uses the Republicans' words when she challenges him. In other words, you got 50 Republican security experts who are against Trump. Even Cruz would not say that he thinks Trump is fit for office. Rather than her attacking, just quote the Republicans who are still so uncomfortable with this man's leadership. I think that's important.
There's an enormous battlefield that I think Donald Trump has left open for Hillary, and that is the future. When your slogan is "Make America Great Again," that's inherently backward-looking. Yes, she's been on the scene for 25 years, but I think tonight she can say, here are my ideas for the future.
Former President Clinton being introduced, as well as Melania Trump, Donald Trump's wife. Family members also coming out. There was the Ivanka, her husband Jared Kushner. And to point out also,
hard for those people.
Not the first time they have met. Bill Clinton attended the wedding of Melania Trump to Donald Trump, along with Secretary Clinton as well, family members. It is something candidates like often to see their family members sitting in the front row. It wasn't clear whether Bill Clinton was going to be. He often likes to be backstage watching on television.
I can tell you, he doesn't want to be sitting out there. He's proud of his wife, but this is tough.
Let's listen.
NBC Nightly News. You can welcome him now.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you. Good evening. Nice to see every seat is filled. There was some question whether we'd have enough interest for tonight, but I guess we've taken care of that. Mrs. Trump, President Clinton, good to see you. Good to see everyone. That thud you heard backstage was the sound of my knees buckling when Frank mentioned a potential audience of 100 million. But it's just us tonight. And in a moment, it'll just be the three of us and hopefully just the two of them. That's what it's all about. As you can imagine, this is not an easy job, so I'm going to ask your help tonight. You heard the admonition. If you could please refrain from clapping and booing or reacting in any audible way, that would make my job a lot easier. And I know the American public would appreciate it because we really want to hear what they have to say tonight. And I'm happy to be the one facilitating that conversation. So what's going to follow are some awkward moments of silence. I'm going to take my seat here in my office for the evening, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning when we're about to come up on the air. And then no fancy lights or musical opens. We just go to it. So thank you for being here. I hope you enjoy the debate.
All right, they're getting ready. Jake, the stakes could not be higher. What do these two candidates need to do?
Well, for Donald Trump, he needs to show himself as somebody who can be trusted with the presidency. We've talked about this all night, that many voters have concerns about his temperament, and he needs to show the American people that he can be restrained, he can be in control, he can behave the way they expect an American president to behave. Hillary Clinton has spent a lot of her campaign trying to delegitimize Donald Trump, disqualify him. I think you'll see her continue to do that tonight, and that will probably be her primary task as well.
And, you know, they're going to be on camera. This is 90 minutes without commercial interruption, but they'll be in a split screen. So when Donald Trump is speaking, we'll see the reaction of Hillary Clinton and vice versa.
That's right. And when it comes to Donald Trump, so much of what he expressed in the primary debates was without words. It was with his facial expressions, lots of facial expressions, to make a point, to maybe vamp, to mock his opponents, to do all kinds of things and send various signals. Is that person going to come? Has he been practicing his poker face or practicing to minimize that when he needs to? Unclear. And same goes for her. She's obviously much more experienced at the one-on-one debate, much more experienced at being on camera all the time. I mean, she has been for a while, but sometimes you can see when she's irritated. So the question is whether or not she wants that to come out.
And we're just a couple of minutes away from the start of this debate. Anderson, back to you.
Incredibly exciting and no doubt tense moments for the candidates. I think it's going to be starting in about 3 or 4 minutes. You know, David, every candidate has a different kind of way they prepare for it, and even particularly in these final moments. How much of this is about opening statements. I mean, how much do they prepare those opening statements?
Well, I think both campaigns, if they're preparing correctly, know what they want to do when they get out there. They know what the first plays are, what the language is. It's very important to start quickly, make a big impact in the first 15 minutes, because a lot of folks who are writing stories on this campaign are going to begin composing their impressions of the campaign almost immediately. Twitter is going to be
That was something that John F. Kennedy did against Richard Nixon very effectively. He basically kind of defined early on, and Nixon basically just responded.
True, but it's more than that now because of the lightning speed at which these things get judged. You know, back in 2012, we knew within 10, 15 minutes that we had lost the debate against Mitt Romney because the media reaction and the punditry were pounding us on Twitter, and we knew what the spin was going to be off of this debate.
Even during the debate, within the first 15
minutes. Oh, my goodness, yes, yeah. It was, we were glum in our room 15 minutes in. So, you know, the beginning is very, very important.
I think they're each going to try and make a large impression right away. And whether it's Hillary Clinton challenging him on something like birtherism right away, or whether it's Donald Trump challenging her in her emails, as Kayleigh was talking about, right away, they're going to play to their base, and then they're going to try and broaden it out, I would think. But I think you've got to do it immediately in this day and age.
He needs to remember, primary season is over. That which brought him thus far cannot carry him all the way to the White House. It could, in fact, hurt him if he plays some of the same cards that were successful in that season.
They both also have to be very well aware at this point of what voters they still need to reach.
Exactly. You know, there may be 6 to 15% of folks who are undecided, and it's a very diverse group of people who are still undecided. Some of those are Romney Republicans, some of those are Bernie Sanders supporters, so they've got to tailor their messages to that. I think one of the things that Hillary Clinton has often been good at in these debates is she brings some new fact about her opponent. She did that very often with Bernie Sanders on guns, on the auto bailout, often putting the other person back on their feet. She's got to do that tonight. I mean, her campaign has spent millions and millions doing that, but she's got to do it again.
One thing I would look for is whether Donald Trump tries to introduce at the beginning of this some self-deprecating humor, which I think would be very, very smart, because people don't expect that of him.
Do you expect that?
Let's remember,
one thing I think would be interesting is, you know, he really wants to make the status quo seem terrible, so he's going to say, what do you have to lose? If he goes there, she should go through the list. You know, you could lose your job in a trade war started by this man. You could lose your life in a hot war started by this man. You could lose your status as a woman in the controversy started by this man. She's got to take away from him that he's the change agent. He's the chaos bringer, not the change agent.
Let's remember that in this journey that we've all had, all of America, for the last 18 months, lots of people like us sat, well, maybe not me, but sat on a lot of panels and said, you know, he's not going to get in, he's not going to get 40%, he's not going to get this, et cetera, et cetera. We don't want to fall into that trap tonight.
And it's not just about reaching voters they haven't reached so far. It's about mobilizing voters they already have to
It's a dual purpose, right? You've got to both stoke the base and expand the tent, and stoke the base in a manner that doesn't alienate the new folks that you need to reach. By way of example, Donald Trump has got to be able to reach out to people of color more effectively than he's done thus far, and keep those white men who don't have a college degree and are his core constituency still enthused.
There are a lot of voters who are not staunchly in either camp. You know, we saw the Washington Post poll yesterday. 18% of voters said they might change their mind based on tonight's debate. That is nearly 1/5 of people watching this, and this is where both candidates have to
Let me go to our Wolf Blitzer who's standing by. The debate is about to begin.
And the debate is going to begin, Jake, with the nationwide polls a dead heat, and the battleground state polls a dead heat.
Yeah, I mean, we can't overstate how significant this debate is. Hillary Clinton, according to polls, has a slight lead, but what pollsters say, it's not so much where a number is as where are they going. And Donald Trump right now...
And this is the biggest night of this campaign. It's been 18 months in the making.
Donald Trump has the momentum right now, so this debate right now could allow Hillary Clinton to stop his momentum, or it could allow Donald Trump to surpass her in some of those key battleground states.
And Wolf, it probably should go without saying, because we've been talking about it for so long, but it does bear repeating as we go into this momentous night. First time we have a woman on this kind of debate stage, and of course she's up against somebody who's never been a politician.
And Lester Holt will now introduce the candidates as we get ready for history.
Good evening from Hofstra University in Hempstead, New York. I'm Lester Holt, anchor of NBC Nightly News. I want to welcome you to the first presidential debate. The participants tonight are Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. This debate is sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. The commission drafted tonight's format, and the rules have been agreed to by the campaigns. The 90-minute debate is divided into 6 segments, each 50 minutes long. We'll explore 3 topic areas tonight: achieving prosperity, America's direction, and securing America. At the start of each segment, I will ask the same lead-off question to both candidates, and they will each have up to 2 minutes to respond. From that point until the end of the segment, we'll have an open discussion. The questions are mine and have not been shared with the commission or the campaigns. The audience here in the room has agreed to remain silent so that we can focus on what the candidates are saying. I will invite you to applaud, however, at this moment as we welcome the candidates. Democratic nominee for President of the United States, Hillary Clinton, and Republican nominee for President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Good luck to you. Trump, good luck to you. Well, I don't expect us to cover all the issues of this campaign tonight, but I remind everyone there are 2 more presidential debates scheduled. We are going to focus on many of the issues that voters tell us are most important, and we're going to press for specifics. I am honored to have this role, but this evening belongs to the candidates and just as important to the American people. Candidates, we look forward to hearing you articulate your policies and your positions, as well as your visions and your values. So, let's begin. We're calling this opening segment Achieving Prosperity, and central to that is jobs. There are 2 economic realities in America today. There's been a record 6 straight years of job growth, and new census numbers show incomes have increased at a record rate after years of stagnation. However, income inequality remains significant, and nearly half of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Beginning with you, Secretary Clinton, why are you a better choice than your opponent to create the kinds of jobs that will put more money into the pockets of American workers?
Well, thank you, Lester, and thanks to Hofstra for hosting us. The central question in this election is really what kind of country we want to be and what kind of future we'll build together. Today is my granddaughter's 2nd birthday, so I think about this a lot. First, we have to build an economy that works for everyone, not just those at the top. That means we need new jobs, good jobs, with rising incomes. I want us to invest in you. I want us to invest in your future. That means jobs in infrastructure, in advanced manufacturing, in innovation and technology, clean renewable energy, and small business, because most of the new jobs will come from small business. We also have to make the economy fairer. That starts with raising the national minimum wage and also guarantee, finally, equal pay for women's work. I also want to see more companies do profit sharing. If you help create the profits, you should be able to share in them, not just the executives at the top. And I want us to do more to support people who are struggling to balance family and work. I've heard from so many of you about the difficult choices you face and the stresses that you're under. So let's have paid family leave, earned sick days. Let's be sure we have affordable child care and debt-free college. How are we going to do it? We're going to do it by having the wealthy pay their fair share and close the corporate loopholes. Finally, we tonight are on the stage together, Donald Trump and I. Donald, it's good to be with you. We're going to have a debate where we are talking about the important issues facing our country. You have to judge us. Who can shoulder the immense, awesome responsibilities of the presidency? Who can put into action the plans that will make your life better? I hope that I will be able to earn your vote on November 8th.
Secretary Clinton, thank you. Mr. Trump, the same question to you. It's about putting more money into the pockets of American workers. You have up to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Lester. Our jobs are fleeing the country. They're going to Mexico. They're going to many other countries. You look at what China is doing to our country in terms of making our product. They're devaluing their currency, and there's nobody in our government to fight them. And we have a very good fight, and we have a winning fight, because they're using our country as a piggy bank to rebuild China, and many other countries are doing the same thing. So we're losing our good jobs, so many of them. When you look at what's happening in Mexico, a friend of mine who builds plants said it's the 8th wonder of the world. They're building some of the biggest plants anywhere in the world, some of the most sophisticated, some of the best plants. With the United States, as he said, not so much. So Ford is leaving. You see that, their small car division leaving. Thousands of jobs, leaving Michigan, leaving Ohio. They're all leaving, and we can't allow it to happen anymore. As far as child care is concerned and so many other things, I think Hillary and I agree on that. We probably disagree a little bit as to numbers and amounts and what we're going to do, but perhaps we'll be talking about that later. But we have to stop our jobs from being stolen from us. We have to stop our companies from leaving the United States, and with it, firing all of their people. All you have to do is take a look at Carrier Air Conditioning in Indianapolis. They left, fired 1,400 people. They're going to Mexico. So many, hundreds and hundreds of companies are doing this. We cannot let it happen. Under my plan, I'll be reducing taxes tremendously, from 35% to 15% for companies, small and big businesses. That's going to be a job creator like we haven't seen since Ronald Reagan. It's going to be a beautiful thing to watch. Companies will come, they will build, they will expand, new companies will start, and I look very, very much forward to doing it. We have to renegotiate our trade deals, and we have to stop these countries from stealing our companies and our jobs.
Secretary Clinton, would you like to respond?
Well, I think that trade is an important issue. Of course, we are 5% of the world's population. We have to trade with the other 95%. And we need to have smart, fair trade deals. We also, though, need to have a tax system that rewards work and not just financial transactions. And the kind of plan that Donald has put forth would be trickle-down economics all over again. In fact, it would be the most extreme version, the biggest tax cuts for the top percent of the people in this country than we've ever had. I call it trumped up trickle-down, because that's exactly what it would be. That is not how we grow the economy. We just have a different view about what's best for growing the economy, how we make investments that will actually produce jobs and rising incomes. I think we come at it from somewhat different perspectives. I understand that. You know, Donald was very fortunate in his life, and that's all to his benefit. He started his business with $14 million borrowed from his father, and he really believes that the more you help wealthy people, the better off we'll be, and that everything will work out from there. I don't buy that. I have a different experience. My father was a small businessman. He worked really hard. He printed drapery fabrics on long tables where he pulled out those fabrics and he went down with a silk screen and dumped the paint in and took the squeegee and kept going. And so what I believe is the more we can do for the middle class, the more we can invest in you, your education, your skills, your future, the better we will be off and the better we'll grow. That's the kind of economy I want us to see again.
Let me follow up with Mr. Trump, if I can. You've talked about creating 25 million jobs, and you've promised to bring back millions of jobs for Americans. How are we going to bring back the industries that have left this country for cheaper labor overseas? How specifically are you going to tell American manufacturers that you have to come back?
Well, for one thing, and before we start on that, my father gave me a very small loan in 1975, and I built it into a company that's worth many, many billions of dollars with some of the greatest assets in the world. And I say that only because that's the kind of thinking that our country needs. Our country's in deep trouble. We don't know what we're doing when it comes to devaluations, and all of these countries all over the world, especially China, they're the best ever at it. What they're doing to us is a very, very sad thing. So we have to do that. We have to renegotiate our trade deals. And Lester, they're taking our jobs, they're giving incentives, they're doing things that, frankly, we don't do. Let me give you the example of Mexico. They have a VAT tax. We're in a different system. When we sell into Mexico, there's a tax. When they sell in automatic, 16% approximately. When they sell into us, there's no tax. It's a defective agreement. It's been defective for a long time, many years, but the politicians haven't done anything about it. Now, in all fairness to Secretary Clinton, yes, is that okay? Good. I want you to be very happy. It's very important to me. But in all fairness to Secretary Clinton, when she started talking about this, it was really very recently. She's been doing this for 30 years. And why hasn't she made the agreements better? The NAFTA agreement is defective just because of the tax and many other reasons, but just because of the fact.
Let me interrupt just a moment.
Secretary Clinton and others, politicians, should have been doing this for years, not right now because of the fact that we've created a movement. They should have been doing this for years. What's happened to our jobs and our country and our economy generally is, look, we owe $20 trillion. We cannot do it any longer, Lester.
Back to the question, though, how do you specifically bring back jobs? American manufacturers, how do you make them bring the jobs back?
Well, the first thing you do is don't let the jobs leave. The companies are leaving. I could name, there are thousands of them. They're leaving, and they're leaving in bigger numbers than ever. And what you do is you say, fine, you want to go to Mexico or some other country, good luck. We wish you a lot of luck. But if you think you're going to make your air conditioners or your cars or your cookies or whatever you make and bring them into our country without a tax, you're wrong. And once you say you're going to have to tax them coming in, and our politicians never do this because they have special interests, and the special interests want those companies to leave because in many cases they own the companies. So what I'm saying is we can stop them from leaving. We have to stop them from leaving, and that's a big, big factor.
Let me let Secretary Clinton get there.
Let's stop for a second and remember where we were 8 years ago. We had the worst financial crisis, the Great Recession, the worst since the 1930s. That was in large part because of tax policies that slashed taxes on the wealthy, failed to invest in the middle class, took their eyes off of Wall Street, and created a perfect storm. In fact, Donald was one of the people who rooted for the housing crisis. He said back in 2006, gee, I hope it does collapse because then I can go in and buy some and make some money. Well, it did collapse.
That's called business, by the way.
9 million people lost their jobs. 5 million people lost their homes, and $13 trillion in family wealth was wiped out. Now, we have come back from that abyss, and it has not been easy. So we're now on the precipice of having a potentially much better economy, but the last thing we need to do is to go back to the policies that failed us in the first place. Independent experts have looked at what I've proposed and looked at what Donald's proposed, and basically they've said this, that if his tax plan, which would blow up the debt by over $5 trillion and would in some instances disadvantage middle-class families compared to the wealthy, were to go into effect, we would lose 3.5 million jobs and maybe have another recession. They've looked at my plans and they've said, okay, if we can do this, and I intend to get it done, we will have 10 million more new jobs because we will be making investments where we can grow the economy. Take clean energy. Some country is going to be the clean energy superpower of the 21st century. Donald thinks that climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. I think it's real.
I do not say that.
And I think it's important that we grip this and deal with it both at home and abroad. And here's what we can do. We can deploy 500 million more solar panels. We can have enough clean energy to power every home. We can build a new modern electric grid. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of new economic activity. So I've tried to be very specific about what we can and should do, and I am determined that we're going to get the economy really moving again, building on the progress we've made over the last 8 years, but never going back to what got us in trouble in the first place.
Mr. Trump.
She talks about solar panels. We invested in a solar company, our country. That was a disaster. They lost plenty of money on that one. Now, look, I'm a great believer in all forms of energy, but we're putting a lot of people out of work. Our energy policies are a disaster. Our country is losing so much in terms of energy, in terms of paying off our debt. You can't do what you're looking to do with $20 trillion in debt. The Obama administration, from the time they've come in, is over 230 years worth of debt, and he's topped it. He's doubled it in a course of almost 8 years, 7.5 years to be semi-exact. So I will tell you this, we have to do a much better job at keeping our jobs, and we have to do a much better job at giving companies incentive to build new companies or to expand, because they're not doing it. And all you have to do is look at Michigan and look at Ohio and look at all of these places where so many of their jobs and their companies are just leaving. They're gone. And Hillary, I just ask you this. You've been doing this for 30 years. Why are you just thinking about these solutions right now? For 30 years you've been doing it, and now you're just starting to think of solutions.
Well, actually,
I will bring back jobs. You can't bring back jobs.
Well, actually, I have thought about this quite a bit.
Yeah, for 30 years.
I have, well, not quite that long. I think my husband did a pretty good job in the 1990s. I think a lot about what worked and how we can make it work again.
Well, he approved
3 million
NAFTA.
new jobs,
He approved
a balanced
NAFTA,
budget,
which is the single worst trade deal ever approved in this country.
Incomes went up for everybody. Manufacturing jobs went up also in the 1990s, if we're actually going to look at the facts. When I was in the Senate, I had a number of trade deals that came before me, and I held them all to the same test. Will they create jobs in America? Will they raise incomes in America? And are they good for our national security? Some of them I voted for. The biggest one, a multinational one known as CAFTA, I voted against. And because I hold the same standards as I look at all of these trade deals. But let's not assume that trade is the only challenge we have in the economy. I think it is a part of it, and I've said what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a special prosecutor. We're going to enforce the trade deals we have, and we're going to hold people accountable. When I was Secretary of State, we actually increased American exports globally 30%. We increased them to China 50%. So I know how to really work to get new jobs and to get exports that help to create more new jobs.
Well, you haven't done it in 30 years or 26 years.
Well,
any number you
I've
want
been
to
a
do.
senator,
You
Donald,
haven't done it.
And
you haven't
I
done
have
it.
been a
And
Secretary of State, and I have
Your
done
husband signed
a lot.
NAFTA, which was one of the worst things that ever happened
Well,
to the
that's your
manufacturing
opinion.
industry.
That is your
You go
opinion.
to New England, you go to Ohio, Pennsylvania, you go anywhere you want, Secretary Clinton, and you will see devastation where manufacturing is down 30, 40, sometimes 50%. NAFTA is the worst trade deal maybe ever signed anywhere, but certainly ever signed in this country. And now you want to approve Trans-Pacific Partnership. You were totally in favor of it. Then you heard what I was saying, how bad it is, and you said, I can't win that debate. But you know that if you did win, you would approve that, and that will be almost as bad as NAFTA. Nothing will ever top NAFTA.
That is just not accurate. I was against it once it was finally negotiated and the terms were laid out. I wrote about that in...
You called it the gold standard.
Well, I hope...
You called it the gold standard of trade deals. You said it's the finest deal you've ever seen.
No.
And then you heard what I said about it, and all of a sudden you were against it.
Well, Donald, I know you live in your own reality, but that is not the facts. The facts are, I did say I hoped it would be a good deal, but when it was negotiated, which I was not responsible for, I concluded it wasn't. I wrote about that.
So is it President Obama's fault? Is it President Obama's fault?
Even announced. Look, there are
Secretary, is it President Obama's fault?
There are
because he's pushing it.
There are different views about what's good for our country, our economy, and our leadership in the world. And I think it's important to look at what we need to do to get the economy going again. That's why I said new jobs with rising incomes, investments, not in more tax cuts that would add $5 trillion to the debt.
But you have no plan.
Oh, I do.
Secretary,
in fact,
you
I
have no plan.
A book about it. It's called Stronger Together. You can pick it up tomorrow.
That's about all you...
Folks,
at the bookstore or at an airport near you.
We're going to move to...
But it's because I see this. We need to have strong growth, fair growth, sustained growth. We also have to look at how we help families balance the responsibilities at home and the responsibilities at business. So we have a very robust set of plans, and people who have looked at both of our plans have concluded that mine would create 10 million jobs and yours would lose us 3.5 million jobs and explode
You are
the
going
debt,
to approve one of the biggest tax cuts in history. You are going to approve one of the biggest tax increases in history. you are going to drive business out. Your regulations are a disaster, and you're going to increase regulations all over the place. And by the way, my tax cut is the biggest since Ronald Reagan. I'm very proud of it. It will create tremendous numbers of new jobs. But regulations, you are going to regulate these businesses out of existence. When I go around, Lester, I tell you this, I've been all over. And when I go around, despite the tax cut, the things that business and people like the most is the fact that I'm cutting regulation. You have regulations on top of regulations, and new companies cannot form, and old companies are going out of business, and you want to increase the regulations and make them even worse. I'm going to cut regulations, but I'm going to cut taxes big league, and you're going to raise taxes big league. End of story.
Let me get you to pause right there, because we're going to move into the next segment. We're going to talk taxes.
That can't be left
Please
to
just
stand.
take 30 seconds.
I kind of assumed that there would be a lot of these charges and claims. And so we have taken the homepage of my website, HillaryClinton.com, and we've turned it into a fact checker. So if you want to see in real time what the facts are, please go and take a look.
And take a look at mine also, and you'll see.
Add a penny to the debt. And your plans would add $5 trillion to the debt. What I have proposed would cut regulations and streamline them for small businesses. What I have proposed would be paid for by raising taxes on the wealthy, because they have made all the gains in the economy. And I think it's time that the wealthy and corporations paid their fair share to support this country.
You just opened the next segment.
Well, look, could I just finish that? I think I should.
I'm going to give you a chance right here. With the
and
new
you take a look at her website. She's going to raise taxes $1.3 trillion.
Mr. Trump,
and look at her website. You know what? It's no different than this. She's telling us how to fight ISIS. Just go to her website. She tells you how to fight ISIS on her website. I don't think General Douglas MacArthur would like that too much.
The next segment, we're continuing the subject of...
Well, at least I have a plan to fight ISIS.
No, you're telling the enemy everything you want to do.
No, we're not.
See, you're telling the enemy everything you want to do. No wonder you've been fighting. No wonder you've been fighting ISIS your entire adult life.
Folks,
go to the fact checkers. Get to work.
You are unpacking a lot here, and we're still on the issue of achieving prosperity. And I want to talk about taxes. The fundamental difference between the two of you concerns the wealthy. Secretary Clinton, you're calling for a tax increase in the wealthiest Americans. I'd like you to further defend that. And Mr. Trump, you're calling for tax cuts for the wealthy. I'd like you to defend that. And this next 2-minute answer goes to you, Mr. Trump.
Well, I'm really calling for major jobs, because the wealthy are going to create tremendous jobs. They're going to expand their companies. They're going to do a tremendous job. I'm getting rid of the carried interest provision. And if you really look, it's not a tax. It's really not a great thing for the wealthy. It's a great thing for the middle class. It's a great thing for companies to expand. And when these people are going to put billions and billions of dollars into companies, and when they're going to bring $2.5 trillion back from overseas, where they can't bring the money back because politicians like Secretary Clinton won't allow them to bring the money back because the taxes are so onerous and the bureaucratic red tape. So what is so bad? So what they're doing is they're leaving our country, and they're, believe it or not, leaving because taxes are too high and because some of them have lots of money outside of our country, and instead of bringing it back and putting the money to work because they can't work out a deal to, and everybody agrees it should be brought back, instead of that, they're leaving our country to get their money because they can't bring their money back into our country because of bureaucratic red tape, because they can't get together, because we have a president that can't sit them around a table and get them to approve something. And here's the thing. Republicans and Democrats agree that this should be done. $2.5 trillion. I happen to think it's double that. It's probably $5 trillion that we can't bring into our country, Lester. And with a little leadership, you'd get it in here very quickly, and it could be put to use on the inner cities and lots of other things, and it would be beautiful. But we have no leadership. And honestly, that starts with Secretary Clinton.
All right, you have 2 minutes on the same question to defend tax increases on the wealthiest Americans, Secretary Clinton.
I have a feeling that by the end of this evening, I'm going to be blamed for everything that's ever happened.
Why not?
Why not? Yeah, why not? Just join the debate by saying more crazy things. Now, let me say,
there's nothing crazy about not letting our companies bring their money back into their country.
This is Secretary Clinton's 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, well, let's start the clock again, Lester. We've looked at your tax proposals. I don't see changes in the corporate tax rates or the kinds of proposals you're referring to that would cause the repatriation, bringing back of money that's stranded overseas. I happen to support that. I happen to support that in a way that will actually work to our benefit. But when I look at what you have proposed, you have what is called now the Trump loophole, because it would so advantage you and the business you do. You've proposed an approach that has a $4 billion tax benefit for your family. And when you look at what you are proposing,
how much for my family?
It is,
Lester,
as I said, trumped up trickle down. Trickle down did not work. It got us into the mess we were in 2008 and 9. Slashing taxes on the wealthy hasn't worked, and a lot of really smart, wealthy people know that. And they are saying, hey, we need to do more to make the contributions we should be making to rebuild the middle class. I don't think top-down works in America. I think building the middle class, investing in the middle class, making college debt-free so more young people can get their education, helping people refinance their debt from college at a lower rate. Those are the kinds of things that will really boost the economy. Broad-based, inclusive growth is what we need in America, not more advantages for people at the very top.
Mr. Trump,
typical politician, all talk, no action, sounds good, doesn't work, never going to happen. Our country is suffering because people like Secretary Clinton have made such bad decisions in terms of our jobs and in terms of what's going on. Now, look, we have the worst revival of an economy since the Great Depression. And believe me, we're in a bubble right now. And the only thing that looks good is the stock market. But if you raise interest rates even a little bit, that's going to come crashing down. We are in a big, fat, ugly bubble. And we better be awfully careful. And we have a Fed that's doing political things. This Janet Yellen of the Fed. The Fed is doing political by keeping the interest rates at this level. And believe me, the day Obama goes off and he leaves and he goes out to the golf course for the rest of his life to play golf, when they raise interest rates, you're going to see some very bad things happen because the Fed is not doing their job. The Fed is being more political than Secretary Clinton.
Mr. Trump, we're talking about the burden that Americans have to pay, yet you have not released your tax returns. And the reason nominees have released their returns for decades is so that voters will know if their potential president owes money to, who he owes it to, and any business conflicts. Don't Americans have a right to know if there are any conflicts of interest?
I don't mind releasing. I'm under a routine audit, and it'll be released. And as soon as the audit's finished, it'll be released. But you will learn more about Donald Trump by going down to the federal elections, where I filed a 104-page, essentially financial statement of sorts, the forms that they have. It shows income. In fact, the income, I just looked today, the income is filed at $694 million for this past year. $694 million. If you would have told me I was going to make that 15 or 20 years ago, I would have been very surprised. But that's the kind of thinking that our country needs. When we have a country that's doing so badly, that's being ripped off by every single country in the world, it's the kind of thinking that our country needs because everybody... Lester, we have a trade deficit with all of the countries that we do business with of almost $800 billion a year. You know what that is? That means who's negotiating these trade deals? We have people that are political hacks negotiating our trade deals.
The IRS says an audit of your taxes, you're perfectly free to release your taxes during an audit. And so the question, does the public's right to know outweigh your personal...
Well, I told you, I will release them as soon as the audit. Look, I've been under audit almost for 15 years. I know a lot of wealthy people that have never been audited. I said, do you get audited? I get audited almost every year. And in a way, I should be complaining. I'm not even complaining. I don't mind it. It's almost become a way of life. I get audited by the IRS, but other people don't. I will say this. We have a situation in this country that has to be taken care of. I will release my tax returns against my lawyer's wishes when she releases her 33,000 emails that have been deleted. As soon as she releases them, I will release my tax returns, and that's against my lawyers. They say don't do it. I will tell you this. No, in fact, watching shows, reading the papers, almost every lawyer says you don't release your returns until the audit's complete. When the audit's complete, I'll do it. But I would go against them if she releases her email.
So it's negotiable?
It's not negotiable. No, let her release the email. Why did she delete 33,000?
Well, I'll let her ask that, but let me just admonish the audience one more time. There was an agreement. We did ask you to be silent, so it would be helpful for us. Secretary Clinton.
Well, I think you've just seen another example of bait and switch here. For 40 years, everyone running for president has released their tax returns. You can go and see nearly, I think, 39, 40 years of our tax returns, but everyone has done it. We know the IRS has made clear there is no prohibition on releasing it when you're under audit. So you've got to ask yourself, why won't he release his tax returns? And I think there may be a couple of reasons. First, maybe he's not as rich as he says he is. Second, maybe he's not as charitable as he claims to be. Third, we don't know all of his business dealings, but we have been told through investigative reporting that he owes about $650 million to Wall Street and foreign banks. Or maybe he doesn't want the American people, all of you watching tonight, to know that he's paid nothing in federal taxes, because the only years that anybody's ever seen were a couple of years when he had to turn them over to state authorities when he was trying to get a casino license, and they showed he didn't pay any federal income tax. So if he's paid zero, that means zero for troops, zero for vets, zero for schools or health. And I think probably he's not all that enthusiastic about having the rest of our country see what the real reasons are, because it must be something really important, even terrible, that he's trying to hide. And the financial disclosure statement, they don't give you the tax rate. They don't give you all the details that tax returns would. And it just seems to me that this is something that the American people deserve to see. And I have no reason to believe that he's ever going to release his tax returns, because there's something he's hiding. And we'll guess. We'll keep guessing at what it might be that he's hiding. But I think the question is, were he ever to get near the White House, what would be those conflicts? Who does he owe money to? Well, he owes you the answers to that, and he should provide them.
He also raised the issue of your emails. Do you want to respond to that?
I do. You know, I made a mistake using a private email.
That's for sure.
And if I had to do it over again, I would obviously do it differently. But I'm not going to make any excuses. It was a mistake, and I take responsibility for that.
Mr. Trump?
That was more than a mistake. That was done purposely, okay? That was not a mistake. That was done purposely. When you have your staff taking the Fifth Amendment, taking the Fifth so they're not prosecuted, when you have the man that set up the illegal server taking the Fifth, I think it's disgraceful. And believe me, this country thinks it's disgraceful. It really thinks it's disgraceful also. As far as my tax returns, you don't learn that much from tax returns, that I can tell you. You learn a lot from financial disclosure. And you should go down and take a look at that. The other thing, I'm extremely underleveraged. The report that said 650, which, by the way, a lot of friends of mine that know my business said, boy, that's really not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money relative to what I had. The buildings that were in question, they said in the same report, which was, actually, it wasn't even a bad story, to be honest with you, but the buildings are worth $3.9 billion. And the 650 isn't even on that. But it's not 650. It's much less than that. But I could give you a list of banks. I would, if that would help you, I would give you a list of banks. These are very fine institutions, very fine banks. I could do that very quickly. I am very underleveraged. I have a great company. I have a tremendous income. And the reason I say that is not in a braggadocious way. It's because it's about time that this country had somebody running it that has an idea about money. When we have $20 trillion in debt and our country's a mess, you know, it's one thing to have $20 trillion in debt and our roads are good and our bridges are good and everything's in great shape. Our airports are like from a third world country. You land at LaGuardia, you land at Kennedy, you land at LAX, you land at Newark, and you come in from Dubai and Qatar and you see these incredible, you come in from China, you see these incredible airports and you land, we've become a third world country. So, the worst of all things has happened. We owe $20 trillion, and we're a mess. We haven't even started. And we've spent $6 trillion in the Middle East, according to a report that I just saw, whether it's 6 or 5, but it looks like it's 6. $6 trillion in the Middle East. We could have rebuilt our country twice, and it's really a shame. And it's politicians like Secretary Clinton that have caused this problem. Our country has tremendous problems. We're a debtor nation, we're a serious debtor nation, and we have a country that needs new roads, new tunnels, new bridges, new airports, new schools, new hospitals, and we don't have the money because it's been squandered on so many of your ideas.
Let you
and
respond,
maybe
and we'll move to our
because
next.
you haven't paid any federal income tax for a lot of years. And the other thing I think is important
It would be squandered too, believe me.
If your main claim to be president of the United States is your business, then I think we should talk about that. You know, your campaign manager said that you built a lot of businesses on the backs of little guys. And indeed, I have met a lot of the people who were stiffed by you and your businesses, Donald. I've met dishwashers, painters, architects, glass installers, marble installers, drapery installers, like my dad was, who you refused to pay when they finished the work that you asked them to do. We have an architect in the audience who designed one of your clubhouses at one of your golf courses. It's a beautiful facility. It immediately was put to use, and you wouldn't pay what the man needed to be paid, what he was charging you.
Maybe he didn't do a good job, and I was unsatisfied with his work, which our country should do too.
The thousands of people that you have stiffed over the course of your business not deserve some kind of apology from someone who has taken their labor, taken the goods that they produced, and then refused to pay them? I can only say that I'm certainly relieved that my late father never did business with you. He provided a good middle-class life for us, but the people he worked for, he expected the bargain to be kept on both sides. And when we talk about your business, you've taken business bankruptcy 6 times. There are a lot of great business people that have never taken bankruptcy once. You call yourself the king of debt. You talk about leverage. You even at one time suggested that you would try to negotiate down the national debt of the United States. Well, sometimes there's not a direct transfer of skills from business to government, but sometimes what happened in business would be really bad for government.
Let's let Mr.
And
Trump
we need to be very clear about that.
Look, it's all words, it's all sound bites. I built an unbelievable company, some of the greatest assets anywhere in the world, real estate assets anywhere in the world, beyond the United States, in Europe, lots of different places. It's an unbelievable company. But on occasion, 4 times, we used certain laws that are there. And when Secretary Clinton talks about people that didn't get paid, first of all, they did get paid a lot, but taking advantage of the laws of the nation. Now, if you want to change the laws, you've been there a long time, change the laws. But I take advantage of the laws of the nation because I'm running a company. My obligation right now is to do well for myself, my family, my employees, for my companies. And that's what I do. But what she doesn't say is the tens of thousands of people that are unbelievably happy and that love me. I'll give you an example. We're just opening up on Pennsylvania Avenue, right next to the White House. So if I don't get there one way, I'm going to get to Pennsylvania Avenue another. But we're opening the old post office. Under budget, ahead of schedule, saved tremendous money. I'm a year ahead of schedule. And that's what this country should be doing. We build roads and they cost 2 and 3 and 4 times what they're supposed to cost. We buy products for our military and they come in at costs that are so far above what they were supposed to be because we don't have people that know what they're doing. When we look at the budget is bad to a large extent because we have people that have no idea as to what to do and how to buy. The Trump International is way under budget and way ahead of schedule, and we should be able to do that for our country.
We're well behind schedule, so I want to move to our next segment. We move into our next segment talking about America's direction, and let's start by talking about race. The share of Americans who say race relations are bad in this country is the highest it's been in decades, much of it amplified by shootings of African Americans by police, as we've seen recently in Charlotte and Tulsa. Race has been a big issue in this campaign, and one of you is going to have to bridge a very wide and bitter gap. So how do you heal the divide? Secretary Clinton, you get 2 minutes on this.
Well, you're right. Race remains a significant challenge in our country. Unfortunately, race still determines too much. Often determines where people live, determines what kind of education in their public schools they can get, and yes, it determines how they're treated in the criminal justice system. We've just seen those 2 tragic examples in both Tulsa and Charlotte. And we've got to do several things at the same time. We have to restore trust between communities and the police. We have to work to make sure that our police are using the best training, the best techniques, that they're well prepared to use force only when necessary. Everyone should be respected by the law, and everyone should respect the law. Right now, that's not the case in a lot of our neighborhoods. So I have, ever since the first day of my campaign, called for criminal justice reform. I've laid out a platform that I think would begin to remedy some of the problems we have in the criminal justice system. But we also have to recognize, in addition to the challenges that we face with policing, there are so many good, brave police officers who equally want reform. So we have to bring communities together in order to begin working on that as a mutual goal. And we've got to get guns out of the hands of people who should not have them. The gun epidemic is the leading cause of death of young African American men, more than the next 9 causes put together. So we have to do 2 things, as I said. We have to restore trust. We have to work with the police. We have to make sure they respect the communities and the communities respect them. And we have to tackle the plague of gun violence, which is a big contributor to a lot of the problems that we're seeing today.
All right, Mr. Trump, you have 2 minutes. How do you heal the divide?
Well, first of all, Secretary Clinton doesn't want to use a couple of words, and that's law and order. And we need law and order. If we don't have it, we're not going to have a country. And when I look at what's going on in Charlotte, a city I love, a city where I have investments, when I look at what's going on throughout various parts of our country, whether it's, I can just keep naming them all day long. We need law and order in our country. And I just got today, as you know, the endorsement of the Fraternal Order of Police. We just came in. We have endorsements from, I think, almost every police group, a large percentage of them in the United States. We have a situation where we have our inner cities, African Americans, Hispanics, are living in hell because it's so dangerous. You walk down the street, you get shot. In Chicago, they've had thousands of shootings, thousands, since January 1st. Thousands of shootings. And I'm saying, where is this? Is this a war-torn country? What are we doing? And we have to stop the violence. We have to bring back law and order. In a place like Chicago, where thousands of people have been killed, thousands over the last number of years. In fact, almost 4,000 have been killed since Barack Obama became president. Almost 4,000 people in Chicago have been killed. We have to bring back law and order. Now, whether or not in a place like Chicago you do stop and frisk, which worked very well, Mayor Giuliani is here, it worked very well in New York. It brought the crime rate way down. But you take the gun away from criminals that shouldn't be having it. We have gangs roaming the street, and in many cases, they're illegally here, illegal immigrants, and they have guns, and they shoot people. And we have to be very strong, and we have to be very vigilant. We have to know what we're doing. Right now, our police, in many cases, are afraid to do anything. We have to protect our inner cities because African-American communities are being decimated by crime.
Your 2 minutes expired, but I do want to follow up. Stop and frisk was ruled unconstitutional in New York because it largely singled out Black and Hispanic young men.
No, you're wrong. It went before a judge who was a very against police judge. It was taken away from her, and our new mayor, refused to go forward with the case. They would have won an appeal. If you look at it throughout the country, there are many places where
the argument is that it's a form of racial profiling.
No, the argument is that we have to take the guns away from these people that have them and that are bad people that shouldn't have them. These are felons. These are people that are bad people that shouldn't be. When you have 3,000 shootings in Chicago from January 1st, when you have 4,000 people killed in Chicago by guns from the beginning of the presidency of Barack Obama, his hometown, you have to have stop and frisk. You need more police. You need a better community relation. You don't have good community relations in Chicago. It's terrible. I have property there. It's terrible what's going on in Chicago. But when you look, and Chicago's not the only, you go to Ferguson, you go to so many different places. You need better relationships. I agree with Secretary Clinton on this. You need better relationships between the communities and the police because in some cases it's not good. But you look at Dallas where the relationships were really studied. The relationships were really a beautiful thing. And then 5 police officers were killed one night very violently. So there's some bad things going on, some really bad things.
Secretary Clinton,
but we need, Lester, we need law and order. And we need law and order in the inner cities because the people that are most affected by what's happening are African American and Hispanic people. And it's very unfair to them what our politicians are allowing to happen.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, I've heard Donald say this at his rallies, and it's really unfortunate that he paints such a dire, negative picture of Black communities in our country. You know, the vibrancy of the Black church, the Black businesses that employ so many people, the opportunities that so many families are working to provide for their kids. There's a lot that we should be proud of and we should be supporting and lifting up. But we do always have to make sure we keep people safe. There are the right ways of doing it, and then there are ways that are ineffective. Stop and frisk was found to be unconstitutional, and in part because it was ineffective. It did not do what it needed to do. Now, I believe in community policing, and in fact, violent crime is 1/2 of what it was in 1991. Property crime is down 40%. We just don't want to see it creep back up. We've had 25 years of very good cooperation, but there were some problems, some unintended consequences. Too many young African American and Latino men ended up in jail for nonviolent offenses, and it's just a fact that if you're a young African American man and you do the same thing as a young white man, you are more likely to be arrested, charged, convicted, and incarcerated. So we've got to address the systemic racism in our criminal justice system. We cannot just say law and order. We have to say we have to come forward with a plan that is going to divert people from the criminal justice system, deal with mandatory minimum sentences, which have put too many people away for too long for doing too little. We need to have more second chance programs. I'm glad that we're ending private prisons in the federal system. I want to see them ended in the state system. You shouldn't have a profit motivation to fill prison cells with young Americans. So there are some positive ways we can work on this. And I believe strongly that common sense gun safety measures would assist us right now. And this is something Donald has supported along with the gun lobby. Right now, we've got too many military-style weapons on the streets. In a lot of places, our police are outgunned. We need comprehensive background checks, and we need to keep guns out of the hands of those who will do harm. And we finally need to pass a prohibition on anyone who's on the terrorist watch list from being able to buy a gun in our country. If you're too dangerous to fly, you are too dangerous to buy a gun. So there are things we can do, and we ought to do it in a bipartisan way.
Secretary Clinton, last week you said we've got to do everything possible to improve policing, to go right at implicit bias. Do you believe that police are implicitly biased against black people?
Lester, I think implicit bias is a problem for everyone, not just police. I think, unfortunately, too many of us in our great country jump to conclusions about each other. And therefore, I think we need all of us to be asking hard questions about, why am I feeling this way? But when it comes to policing, since it can have literally fatal consequences, I have said in my first budget, we would put money into that budget to help us deal with implicit bias by retraining a lot of our police officers. I met with a group of very distinguished, experienced police chiefs a few weeks ago. They admit it's an issue. They've got a lot of concerns. Mental health is one of the biggest concerns because now police are having to handle a lot of really difficult mental health problems on the street. They want support. They want more training. They want more assistance. And I think the federal government could be in a position where we would offer and provide that.
I'd like to respond.
Please.
First of all, I agree, and a lot of people, even within my own party, want to give certain rights to people on watch lists and no-fly lists. I agree with you. When a person is on a watch list or a no-fly list, and I have the endorsement of the NRA, which I'm very proud of. These are very, very good people, and they're protecting the Second Amendment. But I think we have to look very strongly at no-fly lists and watch lists. And when people are on there, even if they shouldn't be on there, we'll help them. We'll help them legally. We'll help them get off. But I tend to agree with that quite strongly. I do want to bring up the fact that you were the one that brought up the word super predator about young black youth. And that's a term that I think was it's been horribly met, as you know. I think you've apologized for it. But I think it was a terrible thing to say. And when it comes to stop and frisk, you're talking about taking guns away. Well, I'm talking about taking guns away from gangs and people that use them. And I really don't think you disagree with me on this, if you want to know the truth. I think maybe there's a political reason why you can't say it, but I really don't believe. In New York City, stop and frisk, we had 2,200 murders, and stop and frisk brought it down to 500 murders. 500 murders is a lot of murders. Hard to believe. 500 is supposed to be good. But we went from 2,200 to 500, and it was continued on by Mayor Bloomberg, and it was terminated by current mayor. But stop and frisk had a tremendous impact on the safety of New York City, tremendous beyond belief. So when you say it has no impact, it really did. It had a very, very big impact.
Well, it's also fair to say, if we're going to talk about mayors, that under the current mayor, crime has continued to drop, including murders. So there is...
You're wrong.
No, I'm not.
Murders are up. All right,
New York has done an excellent job, and I give credit. I give credit across the board, going back to mayors, to police chiefs, because it has worked, and other communities need to come together to do what will work as well. Look, one murder is too many. But it is important that we learn about what has been effective and not go to things that sound good that really did not have the kind of impact that we would want. Who disagrees with keeping neighborhoods safe? But let's also add, no one should disagree about respecting the rights of young men who live in those neighborhoods. And so we need to do a better job of working again with the communities, faith communities, business communities, as well as the police to try to deal with this problem.
This conversation is about race, and so, Mr. Trump, I have to ask you.
But I'd like to just respond, if I might.
Please, 20 seconds.
I'd just like to respond.
Please respond, then I've got to follow up.
Look, the African-American community has been let down by our politicians. They talk good around election time, like right now, and after the election, they said, see you later, I'll see you in 4 years. The African-American community, look, the community within the inner cities has been so badly treated. They've been abused and used in order to get votes by Democrat politicians, because that's what it is. They've controlled these communities for up to 100 years.
Mr. Trump, let me...
Unbroken. And I will tell you, you look at the inner cities, and I just left Detroit, and I just left Philadelphia, and I just, you know, you've seen me. I've been all over the place. You decided to stay home, and that's okay. But I will tell you, I've been all over, and I've met some of the greatest people I'll ever meet within these communities, and they are very, very upset with what their politicians have told them and what their politicians have done.
Mr. Trump,
I think Donald just criticized me for preparing for this debate. And yes, I did. And you know what else I prepared for? I prepared to be president. And I think that's a good thing.
Mr. Trump, for 5 years, you perpetuated a false claim that the nation's first black president was not a natural-born citizen. You questioned his legitimacy. In the last couple of weeks, you acknowledged what most Americans have accepted for years. The president was born in the United States. Can you tell us what took you so long?
I'll tell you just very simple to say. Sidney Blumenthal works for the campaign and very close friend of Secretary Clinton. And her campaign manager, Patty Doyle, went to, during the campaign, her campaign against President Obama, fought very hard. And you can go look it up and you can check it out. And if you look at CNN this past week, Patty Solis Doyle was on Wolf Blitzer saying that this happened. Blumenthal sent McClatchy, highly respected reporter at McClatchy, to Kenya to find out about it. They were pressing it very hard. She failed to get the birth certificate. When I got involved, I didn't fail. I got him to give the birth certificate. So I'm satisfied with it, and I'll tell you why I'm satisfied with it.
That was
because I want to get on to defeating ISIS, because I want to get on to creating jobs, because I want to get on to having a strong border, because I want to get on to things that are very important to me and that are very important to the country.
I will let you respond. That's important, but I just want to get the answer here. The birth certificate was produced in 2011. You continued to tell the story and question the president's legitimacy in 2012, 13, 14, 15, as recently as January. So the question is, what changed your mind?
Well, nobody was pressing it. Nobody was caring much about it. I figured you'd ask the question tonight, of course, but nobody was caring much about it. But I was the one that got him to produce the birth certificate, and I think I did a good job. Secretary Clinton also fought it. I mean, you know, now everybody in mainstream is going to say, oh, that's not true. Look, it's true. Sidney Blumenthal sent a reporter. You just have to take a look at CNN last week, the interview with your former campaign manager, and she was involved. But just like she can't bring back jobs, she can't produce.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to follow up, and I will let you respond to that, because if there's a lot there, but we're talking about racial healing in this segment. What do you say to Americans?
Well, it was very, I say nothing. I say nothing because I was able to get him to produce it. He should have produced it a long time before. I say nothing. But let me just tell you, when you talk about healing, I think that I've developed very, very good relationships over the last little while with the African-American community. I think you can see that. And I feel that they really wanted me to come to that conclusion, and I think I did a great job and a great service, not only for the country, but even for the president, in getting him to produce his birth certificate.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, just listen to what you heard. And clearly, as Donald just admitted, he knew he was going to stand on this debate stage, and Lester Holt was going to be asking us questions, so he tried to put the whole racist birther lie to bed. but it can't be dismissed that easily. He has really started his political activity based on this racist lie that our first black president was not an American citizen. There was absolutely no evidence for it, but he persisted. He persisted year after year because some of his supporters, people that he was trying to bring into his fold, apparently believed it or wanted to believe it. But remember, Donald started his career back in 1973 being sued by the Justice Department for racial discrimination because he would not rent apartments in one of his developments to African Americans, and he made sure that the people who worked for him understood that was the policy. He actually was sued twice by the Justice Department. So he has a long record of engaging in racist behavior. And the birther lie was a very hurtful one. You know, Barack Obama is a man of great dignity, and I could tell how much it bothered him and annoyed him that this was being touted and used against him. But I like to remember what Michelle Obama said in her amazing speech at our Democratic National Convention. When they go low, we go high. And Barack Obama went high, despite Donald Trump's best efforts to bring him down.
Mr. Trump, you can respond, then we're going to move on to the next segment.
I would love to respond. First of all, I got to watch, in preparing for this, some of your debates against Barack Obama. You treated him with terrible disrespect. And I watched the way you talk now about how lovely everything is and how wonderful you are. It doesn't work that way. You were after him. You were trying to. You even sent out, or your campaign sent out, pictures of him in a certain garb. Very famous pictures. I don't think you can deny that. But just last week, your campaign manager said it was true. So when you try to act holier than thou, it really doesn't work. It really doesn't. Now, as far as the lawsuit, yes, when I was very young, I went into my father's company, had a real estate company in Brooklyn and Queens, and we, along with many, many other companies throughout the country, it was a federal lawsuit, were sued. We settled the suit with no admission of guilt. It was very easy to do, but they sued many people. I notice you bring that up a lot, and you know, I also noticed the very nasty commercials that you do on me in so many different ways, which I don't do on you. Maybe I'm trying to save the money, but frankly, I look at that and I say, isn't that amazing? Because I settled that lawsuit with no admission of guilt, but that was a lawsuit brought against many real estate firms, and it's just one of those things. I'll go on one step further. In Palm Beach, Florida, tough community, a brilliant community, a wealthy community, probably the wealthiest community there is in the world. I opened a club and really got great credit for it. No discrimination against African Americans, against Muslims, against anybody. And it's a tremendously successful club, and I'm so glad I did it. And I have been given great credit for what I did, and I'm very, very proud of it. And that's the way I feel. That is the true way I feel.
Our next segment is called Securing America. We want to start with a 21st century war happening every day in this country. Our institutions are under cyber attack, and our secrets are being stolen. So my question is, who's behind it, and how do we fight it? Secretary Clinton, this answer goes to you.
Well, I think cybersecurity, cyber warfare will be one of the biggest challenges facing the next president, because clearly we're facing at this point two different kinds of adversaries. There are the independent hacking groups that do it mostly for commercial reasons, to try to steal information that they then can use to make money. But increasingly, we are seeing cyber attacks coming from states, organs of states. The most recent and troubling of these has been Russia. There's no doubt now that Russia has used cyber attacks against all kinds of organizations in our country, and I am deeply concerned about this. I know Donald's very praiseworthy of Vladimir Putin, but Putin is playing a really tough, long game here. And one of the things he's done is to let loose cyber attackers to hack into government files, to hack into personal files, hack into the Democratic National Committee. And we recently have learned that, that this is one of their preferred methods of trying to wreak havoc and collect information. We need to make it very clear, whether it's Russia, China, Iran, or anybody else, the United States has much greater capacity. And we are not going to sit idly by and permit state actors to go after our information, our private sector information or our public sector information. And we're going to have to make it clear that we don't want to use the kinds of tools that we have. We don't want to engage in a different kind of warfare, but we will defend the citizens of this country. And the Russians need to understand that. I think they've been treating it as almost a probing. How far would we go? How much would we do? And that's why I was so shocked when Donald publicly invited Putin to hack into Americans. That is just unacceptable. It's one of the reasons why 50 national security officials who served in Republican administration have said that Donald is unfit to be the commander-in-chief. It's comments like that that really worry people who understand the threats that we face.
Mr. Trump, you have 2 minutes in the same question. Who's behind it? And how do we fight
I do want to say that I was just endorsed, and more are coming next week. It'll be over 200 admirals, many of them are here, admirals and generals endorsed me to lead this country. That just happened, and many more are coming, and I'm very proud of it. In addition, I was just endorsed by ICE. They've never endorsed anybody before on immigration. I was just endorsed by ICE. I was just recently endorsed 16,500 Border Patrol agents. So when Secretary Clinton talks about this, I mean, I'll take the admirals and I'll take the generals any day over the political hacks that I see that have led our country so brilliantly over the last 10 years with their knowledge, okay? Because look at the mess that we're in. Look at the mess that we're in. As far as the cyber, I agree to parts of what Secretary Clinton said. We should be better than anybody else, and perhaps we're not. I don't think anybody knows it was Russia that broke into the DNC. She's saying Russia, 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 but maybe it was. I mean, it could be Russia, but it could also be China. It could also be lots of other people. It also could be somebody sitting on their bed that weighs 400 pounds, okay? You don't know who broke in to DNC, but what did we learn with DNC? We learned that Bernie Sanders was taken advantage of by your people, by Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Look what happened to her. But Bernie Sanders was taken advantage of. That's what we learned. Now, whether that was Russia, whether that was China, whether it was another country, we don't know. Because the truth is, under President Obama, we've lost control of things that we used to have control over. We came in with the internet, we came up with the internet, and I think Secretary Clinton and myself would agree very much. When you look at what ISIS is doing with the internet, they're beating us at our own game, ISIS. So we have to get very, very tough on cyber and cyber warfare. It is a huge problem. I have a son, he's 10 years old. He has computers. He is so good with these computers, it's unbelievable. The security aspect of cyber is very, very tough, and maybe it's hardly doable. But I will say we are not doing the job we should be doing. But that's true throughout our whole governmental society. We have so many things that we have to do better, Lester, and certainly cyber is one of them.
Secretary Clinton?
Well, I think there are a number of issues that we should be addressing. I have put forth a plan to defeat ISIS. It does involve going after them online. I think we need to do much more with our tech companies to prevent ISIS and their operatives from being able to use the internet to radicalize, even direct people in our country and Europe and elsewhere. But we also have to intensify our air strikes against ISIS and eventually support our Arab and Kurdish partners to be able to actually take out ISIS in Raqqa and their claim of being a caliphate. We're making progress. Our military is assisting in Iraq, and we're hoping that within the year we'll be able to push ISIS out of Iraq and then, really squeeze them in Syria. But we have to be cognizant of the fact that they've had foreign fighters coming to volunteer for them, foreign money, foreign weapons. So we have to make this the top priority. And I would also do everything possible to take out their leadership. I was involved in a number of efforts to take out al-Qaeda leadership when I was Secretary of State, including, of course, taking out bin Laden. And I think we need to go after Baghdadi as well, make that one of our organizing principles, because we've got to defeat ISIS, and we've got to do everything we can to disrupt their propaganda efforts online.
You mentioned ISIS, and we think of ISIS certainly as over there, but there are American citizens who have been inspired to commit acts of terror on American soil. The latest incident, of course, the bombings we just saw in New York and New Jersey, the knife attack at a mall in Minnesota, and the last year, deadly attacks in San Bernardino and Orlando. I'll ask this to both of you. Tell us specifically how you would prevent homegrown attacks by American citizens, Mr. Trump.
Well, first I have to say one thing, very important. Secretary Clinton is talking about taking out ISIS. We will take out ISIS. Well, President Obama and Secretary Clinton created a vacuum the way they got out of Iraq, because they got out, they shouldn't have been in, but once they got in, the way they got out was a disaster, and ISIS was formed. So she talks about taking them out. She's been doing it a long time. She's been trying to take them out for a long time. But they wouldn't have even been formed if they left some troops behind, like 10,000 or maybe something more than that. And then you wouldn't have had them. Or, as I've been saying for a long time, and I think you'll agree because I said it to you once, had we taken the oil, and we should have taken the oil, ISIS would not have been able to form either, because the oil was their primary source of income. And now they have the oil all over the place, including the oil, a lot of the oil in Libya, which was another one of her disasters.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, I hope the fact checkers are turning up the volume and really working hard. Donald supported the invasion of Iraq.
Wrong.
That is absolutely
wrong.
Proved over and over again.
Wrong.
He actually advocated for the actions we took in Libya and urged that Gaddafi be taken out after actually doing some business with him one time. But the larger point, he says this constantly, is George W. Bush made the agreement about when American troops would leave Iraq, not Barack Obama. And the only way that American troops could have stayed in Iraq is to get an agreement from the then Iraqi government that would have protected our troops. And the Iraqi government would not give that. But let's talk about the question you asked, Lester. The question you asked is, what do we do here in the United States? That's the most important part of this. How do we prevent attacks? How do we protect our people? And I think we've got to have an intelligence surge where we are looking for every scrap of information. I was so proud of law enforcement in New York, in Minnesota, in New Jersey. You know, they responded so quickly, so professionally to the attacks that occurred by Rahami, and they brought him down. And we may find out more information because he is still alive, which may prove to be an intelligence benefit. So we've got to do everything we can to vacuum up intelligence from Europe, from the Middle East. That means we've got to work more closely with our allies. And that's something that Donald has been very dismissive of. We're working with NATO, the longest military alliance in the history of the world, to really turn our attention to terrorism. We're working with our friends in the Middle East, many of which, as you know, are Muslim-majority nations. Donald has consistently insulted Muslims abroad, Muslims at home, when we need to be cooperating with Muslim nations and with the American Muslim community. They're on the front lines. They can provide information to us that we might not get anywhere else. They need to have close working cooperation with law enforcement in these communities, not be alienated and pushed away, as some of Donald's rhetoric, unfortunately, has led to.
Mr.
Well, I'd have to respond.
Please respond.
The Secretary said very strongly about working with. We've been working with them for many years. And we have the greatest mess anyone's ever seen. You look at the Middle East, it's a total mess. Under your direction to a large extent. But you look at the Middle East, you started the Iran deal. That's another beauty where you have a country that was ready to fall. I mean, they were doing so badly. They were choking on the sanctions, and now they're going to be actually probably a major power at some point pretty soon, the way they're going. But when you look at NATO, I was asked on a major show, what do you think of NATO? And you have to understand, I'm a business person. I did really well, but I have common sense. And I said, well, I'll tell you, I haven't given lots of thought to NATO, but two things. Number one, the 28 countries of NATO, many of them aren't paying their fair share. Number two, and that bothers me because we should be, we're defending them, and they should at least be paying us what they're supposed to be paying by treaty and contract. And number two, I said, and very strongly, NATO could be obsolete because, and I was very strong on this, and it was actually covered very accurately in the New York Times, which is unusual for the New York Times, to be honest. But I said they do not focus on terror. And I was very strong, and I said it numerous times. And about 4 months ago, I read on the front page of the Wall Street Journal that NATO is opening up a major terror division. And I think that's great. And I think we should get, because we pay approximately 73% of the cost of NATO. It's a lot of money to protect other people. But I'm all for NATO. But I said they have to focus on terror also. And they're going to do that. And that was, believe me, I'm sure I'm not going to get credit for it, but that was largely because of what I was saying and my criticism of NATO. I think we have to get NATO to go into the Middle East with us, in addition to surrounding nations, and we have to knock the hell out of ISIS, and we have to do it fast. When ISIS formed in this vacuum created by Barack Obama and Secretary Clinton, and believe me, you were the ones that took out the troops. Not only that, you named the day. They couldn't believe it. They sat back probably and said, I can't believe it. They said, no, wait a minute.
We've covered
when
this
when they formed, this is something that never should have happened. It should have never happened. Now, you're talking about taking out ISIS, but you were there and you were Secretary of State when it was a little infant. Now it's in over 30 countries. And you're going to stop them? I don't think so.
Mr. Trump, a lot of these are judgment questions. You had supported the war in Iraq before the invasion. What makes your judgment?
I did not support the war in Iraq.
2002.
That is a mainstream media nonsense put out by her, because she, frankly, I think the best person in her campaign is mainstream media.
My question is, since you
would you like to hear?
Why is your judgment?
Wait a minute. I was against the war in Iraq, just so you put it out.
The record shows otherwise.
The record does not show that.
Why is your judgment?
The record shows that I'm right. When I did an interview with Howard Stern, very lightly, first time anyone's asked me that, I said, very lightly, I don't know, maybe, who knows, essentially. I then did an interview with Neil Cavuto. We talked about the economy is more important. I then spoke to Sean Hannity, which everybody refuses to call Sean Hannity. I had numerous conversations with Sean Hannity at Fox, and Sean Hannity said, and he called me the other day, and I spoke to him about it. He said, you were totally against the war, because he was for the war.
Why is your judgment better than...
And that was before the war started. Sean Hannity said very strongly to me and other people, he's willing to say, but nobody wants to call him, I was against the war. He said, you used to have fights with me because Sean was in favor of the war. And I understand that side also, not very much, because we should have never been there. But nobody called Sean Hannity. And then they did an article in a major magazine shortly after the war started, I think in 2004, but they did an article which had me totally against the war in Iraq. And one of your compatriots said, you know, whether it was before or right after, Trump was definitely, because if you read this article, there's no doubt. But if somebody, and I'll ask the press, if somebody would call up Sean Hannity, this was before the war started, he and I used to have arguments about the war. I said it's a terrible and a stupid thing. It's going to destabilize the Middle East, and that's exactly what it's done. It's been a disaster.
My reference was to what you had said in 2002, and my question was, why is your judgment any different than Mrs. Clinton?
Well, I have much better judgment than she does. There's no question about that. I also have a much better temperament than she has. You know, I have a much better. She spent, let me tell you, she spent hundreds of millions of dollars on an advertising. You know, they get Madison Avenue into a room, they put names. Oh, temperament, let's go after. I think my strongest asset, maybe by far, is my temperament. I have a winning temperament. I know how to win. She does not know how to win.
Clinton.
Wait, the AFL-CIO the other day, behind the blue screen, I don't know who you were talking to, Secretary Clinton, but you were totally out of control. I said, there's a person with a temperament that's got a problem.
Secretary Clinton.
Woo, okay. Let's talk about two important issues that were briefly mentioned by Donald. First, NATO. You know, NATO as a military alliance has something called Article 5, and basically it says this: an attack on one is an attack on all. And do you know the only time it's ever been invoked? After 9/11, when the 28 nations of NATO said that they would go to Afghanistan with us to fight terrorism, something that they still are doing by our side. With respect to Iran, when I became Secretary of State, Iran was weeks away from having enough nuclear material to form a bomb. They had mastered the nuclear fuel cycle under the Bush administration. They had built covert facilities. They had stocked them with centrifuges that were whirling away. And we had sanctioned them. I voted for every sanction against Iran when I was in the Senate, but it wasn't enough. So I spent a year and a half putting together a coalition that included Russia and China to impose the toughest sanctions on Iran. And we did drive them to the negotiating table. And my successor, John Kerry, and President Obama got a deal that put a lid on Iran's nuclear program without firing a single shot. That's diplomacy. That's coalition building. That's working with other nations. The other day, I saw Donald saying that there were some Iranian sailors on a ship in the waters off of Iran, and they were taunting American sailors who were on a nearby ship. He said, you know, if they taunted our sailors, I'd blow them out of the water and start another war. That's not good judgment. That is not the right temperament to be commander-in-chief, to be taunted. And the worst part of what we've heard Donald say has been about nuclear weapons. He has said repeatedly that he didn't care if other nations got nuclear weapons, Japan, South Korea, even Saudi Arabia. It has been the policy of the United States, Democrats and Republicans, to do everything we could to reduce the proliferation of nuclear weapons. He even said, well, you know, if there were a nuclear war in the East Asia, well, you know, that's fine. You know, have a good time, folks. And in fact, his cavalier attitude about nuclear weapons is so deeply troubling. That is the #1 threat we face in the world, and it becomes particularly threatening if terrorists ever get their hands on any nuclear material. So a man who can be provoked by a tweet should not have his fingers anywhere near the nuclear codes, as far as I think anyone with any sense about this should be concerned.
That line's getting a little bit old, I must say. Listen,
it's a good one, though.
I would like to.
Well describes the problem.
It's not an accurate one at all. It's not an accurate one. So I just want to give a lot of things, and just to respond, I agree with her on one thing. The single greatest problem the world has is nuclear armament, nuclear weapons, not global warming like you think and your president thinks. Nuclear is the single greatest threat. Just to go down the list, we defend Japan, we defend Germany, we defend South Korea, we defend Saudi Arabia, we defend countries. They do not pay us what they should be paying us because we are providing tremendous service and we're losing a fortune. That's why we're losing. We lose on everything. I say, who makes these? We lose on everything. Well, I said that it's very possible that if they don't pay a fair share, because this isn't 40 years ago where we could do what we're doing. We can't defend Japan, a behemoth selling us cars by the million.
We need to move on.
Wait, but it's very important. All I said was they may have to defend themselves or they have to help us out. We're a country that owes $20 trillion. They have to help us out. As far as the nuclear is concerned, I agree. It is the single greatest threat that this country has.
Which leads my next question as we enter our last segment here on still on the subject of securing America. On nuclear weapons, President Obama reportedly considered changing the nation's longstanding policy on first use. Do you support the current policy? Mr. Trump, you have 2 minutes on that.
Well, I have to say that, for what Secretary Clinton was saying about nuclear with Russia, she's very cavalier in the way she talks about various countries. But Russia's been expanding. They have a much newer capability than we do. We have not been updating from the new standpoint. I looked the other night, I was seeing B-52s. They're old enough that your father, your grandfather could be flying them. We are not keeping up with other countries. I would like everybody to end it, just get rid of it. But I would certainly not do first strike. I think that once the nuclear alternative happens, it's over. At the same time, we have to be prepared. I can't take anything off the table because you look at some of these countries, you look at North Korea, we're doing nothing there. China should solve that problem for us. China should go into North Korea. China is totally powerful as it relates to North Korea. And by the way, another one powerful is the worst deal I think I've ever seen negotiated that you started is the Iran deal. Iran is one of their biggest trading partners. Iran has power over North Korea. And when they made that horrible deal with Iran, they should have included the fact that they do something with respect to North Korea. And they should have done something with respect to Yemen and all these other places. And when asked to Secretary Kerry, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you add other things into the deal? One of the great giveaways of all time, including $400 million in cash. Nobody's ever seen that before. That turned out to be wrong. It was actually $1.7 billion in cash. Obviously, I guess, for the hostages, it certainly looks that way. So you say to yourself, why didn't they make the right deal? This is one of the worst deals ever made by any country in history. The deal with Iran will lead to nuclear problems. All they have to do is sit back 10 years, and they don't have to do much, and they're going to end up getting nuclear. I met with Bibi Netanyahu the other day. Believe me, he is not a happy camper.
All right, Mrs. Clinton, Secretary Clinton, you have 2 minutes.
Let me start by saying words matter. Words matter when you run for president, and they really matter when you are president. And I want to reassure our allies in Japan and South Korea and elsewhere that we have mutual defense treaties and we will honor them. It is essential that America's word be good. And so I know that this campaign has caused some questioning and some worries on the part of many leaders across the globe. I've talked with a number of them, but I want to, on behalf of myself and I think on behalf of a majority of the American people, say that, our word is good. It's also important that we look at the entire global situation. There's no doubt that we have other problems with Iran, but personally, I'd rather deal with the other problems having put that lid on their nuclear program than still to be facing that. And Donald never tells you what he would do. Would he have started a war? Would he have bombed Iran? If he's going to criticize a deal that has been very successful in giving us access to Iranian facilities that we never had before, then he should tell us what his alternative would be. But it's like his plan to defeat ISIS. He says it's a secret plan, but the only secret is that he has no plan. So we need to be more precise in how we talk about these issues. People around the world follow our presidential campaigns so closely, trying to get hints about what we will do. Can they rely on us? Are we going to lead the world with strength and in accordance with our values? That's what I intend to do. I intend to be a leader of our country that people can count on, both here at home and around the world, to make decisions that will further peace and prosperity, but also stand up to bullies, whether they're abroad or at home. We cannot let those who would try to destabilize the world, to interfere with American interests and security, to be given any opportunities at all.
Is expired.
Let's do one thing I'd like to say.
Very quickly.
I will go very quickly, but I will tell you that Hillary will tell you to go to her website and read all about how to defeat ISIS, which she could have defeated by never having it, get going in the first place. Right now, it's getting tougher and tougher to defeat them because they're in more and more places, more and more states, more and more nations.
Mr. Trump.
And it's a big problem. And as far as Japan is concerned, I want to help all of our allies. But we are losing billions and billions of dollars. We cannot be the policeman of the world. We cannot protect countries all over the world where they're not paying us what we need.
We have just a few final questions.
She doesn't say that because she's got no business ability. We need heart. We need a lot of things, but you have to have some basic ability. And sadly, she doesn't have that. All of the things that she's talking about could have been taken care of during the last 10 years, let's say, while she had great power, but they weren't taken care of. And if she ever wins this race, they won't be taken care of.
Mr. Trump, this year, Secretary Clinton became the first woman nominated for president by a major party. Earlier this month, you said she doesn't have, quote, a presidential look. She's standing here right now. What did you mean by that?
She doesn't have the look. She doesn't have the stamina. I said she doesn't have the stamina. And I don't believe she does have the stamina. To be president of this country, you need tremendous stamina.
The quote was, I just don't think she has a presidential look.
Wait a minute, Leslie, you asked me a question. Did you ask me a question? You have to be able to negotiate our trade deals. You have to be able to negotiate, that's right, with Japan, with Saudi Arabia. I mean, can you imagine we're defending Saudi Arabia, and with all of the money they have, we're defending them and they're not paying? All you have to do is speak to them. Wait, you have so many different things you have to be able to do, and I don't believe that Hillary has the stamina.
Let's let her respond.
Well, as soon as he travels to 112 countries and negotiates a peace deal, a ceasefire, a release of dissidents, an opening of new opportunities in nations around the world, or even spends 11 hours testifying in front of a congressional committee, he can talk to me about stamina.
The world, let me tell you, Hillary has experience, but it's bad experience. We have made so many bad deals during the last... So she's got experience, that I agree, but it's bad experience. Whether it's the Iran deal that you're so in love with, where we gave them $150 billion back, whether it's the Iran deal, whether it's anything you can name, you almost can't name a good deal.
And someone who has said pregnancy is an inconvenience to employers, who has said women don't deserve equal pay unless they do as good a job as men. And one of the worst things he said was about a woman in a beauty contest. He loves beauty contests, supporting them and hanging around them. And he called this woman Miss Piggy. Then he called her Miss Housekeeping because she was Latina. Donald, she has a name.
Where did you find
her name is Alicia Machado.
Where did you find
And she has become a U.S. citizen, and you can bet she's going to vote this November.
Okay, good. Let me just tell you.
Mr. Trump, just take 10 seconds, and then we're going to have a final question.
Hillary is hitting me with tremendous commercials. Some of it said in entertainment. Some of it said somebody who's been very vicious to me, Rosie O'Donnell. I said very tough things to her, and I think everybody would agree that she deserves it, and nobody feels sorry for her. But you want to know the truth? I was going to say something extremely rough to Hillary, to her family, and I said to myself, I can't do it. I just can't do it. It's inappropriate. It's not nice. But she spent hundreds of millions of dollars on negative ads on me, many of which are absolutely untrue. They're untrue and they're misrepresentations. And I will tell you this, Lester, it's not nice, and I don't deserve that. But it's certainly not a nice thing that she's done. It's hundreds of millions of ads, and the only gratifying thing is I saw the polls come in today, and with all of that money, over $200 million is spent, and I'm either winning or tied, and I've spent practically nothing.
One of you will not win this election. So my final question to you tonight, are you willing to accept the outcome as the will of the voters? Secretary Clinton?
Well, I support our democracy. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But I certainly will support the outcome of this election. And I know Donald's trying very hard to plant doubts about it, but I hope the people out there understand this election's really up to you. It's not about us so much as it is about you and your families and the kind of country and future you want. So I sure hope you will get out and vote as though your future depended on it, because I think it does.
Mr. Trump, very quickly, the same question. Will you accept the outcome as the will of the voters?
I want to make America great again. We are a nation that is seriously troubled. We're losing our jobs. People are pouring into our country. The other day, we were deporting 800 people, and perhaps they passed the wrong button, they pressed the wrong button, or perhaps, worse than that, it was corruption. But these people that we were going to deport for good reason ended up becoming citizens. And it was 800, and now it turns out it might be 1,800, and they don't even know.
Will you accept
Look,
the outcome
here's
of the
the
election?
story. I want to make America great again. I'm going to be able to do it. I don't believe Hillary will. The answer is, if she wins, I will absolutely support her.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for us. That concludes our debate for this evening. A spirited one. We covered a lot of ground. Not everything, as I suspected we would. The next presidential debates are scheduled for October 9th at Washington University in St. Louis and October 19th at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. The conversation will continue. A reminder, the vice presidential debate is scheduled for October 4th at Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia. My thanks to Hillary Clinton and to Donald Trump and to Hofstra University for hosting us tonight. Good night, everyone.
As anticipated, a highly contentious debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, clearly living up to the billing, at times very, very contentious, full of interruptions on some of the most important issues, and it got pretty personal very, very quickly, and especially at the end, you heard that exchange. Jake Tapper, your thoughts?
I thought that, let me say the nice things first. I thought that Donald Trump, at the beginning of the debate, when he stuck with his broad themes, that politicians have gotten us into the place we're in, that the trade deals are bad, that we're losing here, we're losing there, and why would you trust somebody who's been there for 30 years? I thought that those first 20 minutes, half an hour of the debate, he was really doing well. The other hour plus of the debate, not so much. I thought that he took the bait every time Hillary Clinton tried to tempt him into going off message and talking about something he really shouldn't have been spending too much time talking about. He took it every time. He went into the weeds on issues about whether or not he opposed the war in Iraq. He was talking about private conversations he had with a cable news host on a different channel. There were so many different things when he took the bait, and I thought her last hour was very strong.
Yeah, Dana, what about you? What were your reactions? Did these two candidates achieve what they had hoped?
Well, you know, it's unclear. I'll tell you, just in doing some reporting and talking to, first of all, the Trump campaign, they feel that he got across his simple, declarative messages about what his whole campaign has been about. He's an outsider. She's an insider. Yes, she has the experience, but that experience hasn't gotten far enough and hasn't gotten people far enough who are still hurting in this country. So they're kind of trying to take the big picture on that. As far as Hillary Clinton's campaign, Wolf, they feel very good that they poke some holes in his central theme and his central attempt to engage, successful attempt, according to the polls, to engage with so many working class voters, which is that maybe he's not what you think. He doesn't pay potentially federal taxes like you have to. He doesn't play by the same rules that you do. And of course, the birther issue, they feel that they really got him on without a real explanation for why he all of a sudden, after 5 years since the president has released his birth certificate, suddenly says, okay, fine, he was born in the United States. Didn't really give a real answer on that. So in the Hillary Clinton side, they really feel that she drove the conversation for a lot of this debate. And as Jake said, that Donald Trump was on the defensive.
John King, were minds changed as a result of this debate?
depends who we're talking about. If you're a Trump supporter, you liked him making the case about jobs, making the case about trade deals, blaming Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama for things that have gone wrong in the economy. If you're a Clinton supporter, I don't think she lost any support to Donald Trump. So what are we talking about? She has to win some people back from the Libertarian candidate and the Green Party candidate, especially millennials, and there is a swath of people who are undecided. I think on the birther issue, denying climate change and having a little contestant about that. On the women's issues, to Jake's point, he took the bait on some of the issues the Clinton campaign believes will help them with independents and soft, moderate Republicans who they hope to pick up in the suburbs. As the debate wore on, at the beginning of the debate, I agree with Jake completely. Trump came in, wanted to make the case, she can't solve these problems. We need change. We don't need a career politician. We need somebody new. But as it went on, and she was using his own words against him, learning the lessons of all that videotape she watched. Preparation does matter in these things. She watched all the video of the Republican primary debates. You know, when you quote his own words back to him, when you question his business acumen, it gets under his skin. To Trump's credit, he was not as scornful. He was not as animated in his insults and in his mocking of her and criticism of her, but he did take the bait on those attacks.
He was strong at the beginning when he was talking about trade deals. He seemed like somebody who really cared about the issue. He named states where the trade deals had really hurt the neighborhoods, hurt the manufacturing base, Ohio, Pennsylvania, etc. And she did seem like somebody who was defending the status quo. That was the first 20 minutes to half an hour. The rest of it, she showed much more of a mastery of issues. She showed a much more nuanced take on things, and it really was unbelievable. John and I were just sitting here talking about it. She would say something just to dangle out like a piece of meat in front of a rabid wolf, and he would go for it every single time, completely off message. He listed every single time. Even times he didn't argue against going to war in Iraq. He did a Neil Cavuto interview, then he did this, then he did that, then there was an article in 2000. Why are you doing this?
Well, this has been a trademark issue in the campaign on the issues he can't answer. There is no record of him opposing the Iraq war before the invasion. He continued to stand up there tonight and tell Lester Holt he was lying. Lester Holt was not lying. There is no record of Donald Trump beforehand.
But he provided no contrary facts.
Right.
None. Not one.
He had times throughout this campaign and tonight has had a casual relationship with the truth. And I think when we get into the printed fact checks and the research fact checks and our own reality check team, which I know is busy at work right now, in terms of the statements that were clearly whoppers, there will be more on his list than hers, without a doubt.
Yeah, there was some substantive discussions on important issues, but she clearly managed to get under his skin, and he reacted as Donald Trump would react.
He could have talked more about the email scandal than about his own taxes. He did for a little bit. He did like a paragraph on the email scandal. But he then kept on talking about his taxes. Yeah. And even at one point, she said something like, maybe you didn't pay any taxes.
That's smart.
He said, that's smart.
That's smart. Right?
And then he said something about the $20 trillion national debt. And she made some crack about, oh, well, that's because, you don't pay your taxes. Yeah. And he said something, well, if I did, it would be squandered. He almost seemed to concede her point.
That's true.
She clearly had come in very well prepared for this debate. Anderson, over to you.
A fascinating debate. I want to get a quick response from everybody on our panel. Just initial perceptions, Gloria.
I think I agree with Jake that at the beginning of the debate, when Donald Trump was on trade, he was on terra firma. Then I think he totally lost control of the debate, and I think Hillary Clinton controlled the debate on taxes, on the question of birther, on the Iraq war, and at the very end, this question of stamina. When these charges of misogyny were raised against him, he started just attacking Rosie O'Donnell, which was the first time she's ever been mentioned in a presidential debate.
I mean, many of the themes that he talked about were things he has brought up in pretty much every debate he's ever been in. Or if you've seen his stump speech.
We heard a lot of people from the Trump camp, even some of our friends say, well, let Trump be Trump. Well, Trump was Trump, and it wasn't good for him tonight. What he needed to do tonight was to show something more, was to not chase the rabbits down the hole, but add something to people's understanding of his ability to do this job. I think this was a terrible night for him. She came in. It turns out that prep matters, experience matters, and it showed tonight.
Yeah. And it literally showed, right? I mean, the split screen image of her standing there pretty firmly and him sniffling a lot. He was drinking a lot of water. His facial expressions. It was clear, I thought, early on that he was rattled, and it showed. And there were times when she was just happy to let him go deep, 4 or 5 layers deep into birtherism, go 4 or 5 layers deep into his taxes, and just sit there and let it flow, because he was just digging a hole. I mean, in this debate,
there were times I wondered if she was making the calculation: do I jump in or do I just let this go? And it seems like she was
let it go. First rule of home.
He wore on his sleeve before the debate his lack of preparation, and it caught up with him tonight. And I think that, to David's point, there were some easily managed answers that he blew as a result. One that stands out in my mind is he was asked about the 1973 charges of discrimination in housing, and his reply was to say, "I voluntarily settled that suit." Well, the first thing he should have said is, "We never discriminated against anyone."
Right.
And I voluntarily settled that case.
And in fact, what he also said was plenty of other people were sued as well. There were a lot of real estate companies that were part of the lawsuit.
And one other, if I might. When you get asked a question, I'm all for law enforcement. But law enforcement is not the answer to a question, how are you going to improve race relations? The first thing you say is not stop and frisk. And law enforcement, you talk about the need to build bridges.
There were two devastating moments, though, and I think they have to be noted. One was the birther discussion, which was an absolute disaster, ending with him after side discussions about Patty Solis Doyle and Sidney Blumenthal. He ends up excoriating Hillary Clinton for not being kind enough to Barack Obama, who's her chief supporter and made her Secretary of State.
Well, let's play this part of this exchange on birtherism, because we do have Patty Solis Doyle here, who Donald Trump himself mentioned in a CNN interview. Let's play the exchange.
He just simple to say. Sidney Blumenthal works for the campaign and very close friend of Secretary Clinton, and her campaign manager, Patty Doyle, went to, during the campaign, her campaign against President Obama, fought very hard, and you can go look it up and you can check it out. And if you look at CNN this past week, Patty Solis Doyle was on Wolf Blitzer saying that this happened. Blumenthal sent McClatchy, highly respected reporter at McClatchy, to Kenya to find out about it. They were pressing it very hard. She failed to get the birth certificate. When I got involved, I didn't fail. I got him to give the birth certificate.
Just listen to what you heard. And clearly, as Donald just admitted, he knew he was going to stand on this debate stage and Lester Holt was going to be asking us questions. So he tried to put the whole racist birther lie to bed. But it can't be dismissed that easily. He has really started his political activity based on this racist lie that our first black president was not an American citizen.
I feel like Woody Allen and Annie Hall, where he's on the line and said, well, I happen to have Marshall McLuhan right here. I happen to have Patty Solis Doyle right here. Is that what you said on CNN?
No, it is absurd. It is absurd what Donald Trump just said. I never sent anyone to Kenya to look for his birth certificate.
What you had said, because I just looked at the transcript, was that there was a staffer, you weren't sure if she was paid or not, perhaps a volunteer.
Here's what happened.
Okay.
There was a volunteer in Iowa in late 2007 who forwarded an email.
Volunteer on the Clinton campaign.
On the Clinton campaign, who forwarded an email about Obama's heritage, saying that he was a Muslim. We found out about it. I fired him. I called David Plouffe, not you, David, but David Plouffe, and apologized because that's
David Plouffe
not
from the Obama campaign.
Correct, his Obama's campaign manager, because we didn't want to run that kind of campaign. That's called shutting it down, ladies and gentlemen. That's not called trafficking in or promoting it or perpetuating it. That's called shutting it down.
There was an allegation by someone from McClatchy that Sidney Blumenthal had kind of promoted this story to someone from McClatchy. McClatchy sent somebody.
Sidney, it's my understanding, denied that. And Sidney never worked for our campaign. So,
Van, what did you think of tonight? And then we'll go to Trump supporters. Well, first of all, let's not get too excited. We have sat on many, many nights and said Donald Trump has destroyed himself. Donald Trump is done. And like Jason, he comes back again. So, but I will say this. The momentum was all in Donald Trump's direction. And I think Hillary Clinton inarguably stopped the momentum tonight. And I think that she you said earlier, Nia, you nailed it, that there need to be some, you go get them girl moments. I got to jump in. Dana Bash, Dana, let's go to Dana Bash in this room. Dana.
Very happy. And my question for you is, first of all, it sounds like you admitted that you hadn't paid federal taxes and that was smart. Is that what you meant to say?
No, I didn't say that at all. I mean, if they say I didn't, I mean, it doesn't matter. I will say this. I hate the way our government spends our taxes because they are wasting our money. They don't know what they're doing. They're running it so poorly. Whether it's spent in Iraq or wherever they're spending it, they are wasting our money. So I do hate the way our government spends our money.
Patty Doyle just said on CNN that she didn't actually say what you said that she said, that she didn't fire.
Because I got to see that on Wolf Blitzer.
But in terms of just, she was explaining what happened because she was there, and she said that what she fired a volunteer for was in trafficking, in saying that he was a Muslim, not about birtherism.
So why don't you do this? Why don't you see the reporter from McClatchy? Why don't you speak to Sidney Blumenthal, because he's never going to tell you the truth. But why don't you also just take a quick look at what she actually said to Wolf Blitzer?
Did you take the bait? Did you take Hillary Clinton's bait? That was a moment.
Well, I was very proud of the fact that I was able to get him to put up his birth certificate, and Hillary Clinton failed because she can't bring it home. I mean, she just can't bring it home, and she'll fail with jobs, and she'll fail all the way along the line, and I think we proved that tonight. She failed with getting him to do it. I got him to do it, so I'm very proud of her.
But what changed, sir?
You never answered that question.
Say it.
Will you accept the outcome of the election?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Mr. Trump, you apologize. All right, that was a live look at Donald Trump.
I happen to have the tape of Marshall McLuhan here, so let's play what Patty Doyle originally said on Wolf Blitzer.
He just tweeted a couple of tweets. Let me put them up on the screen. Hillary Clinton or her 08 campaign did not start birther movement, period. I was there. And then another tweet. I fired the rogue, and I called David Plouffe to apologize for said rogue. All right, so what does that mean? You fired the rogue. Someone in the campaign, someone who was supporting Hillary Clinton was trying to promote this so-called birther issue. What happened?
Well, so the campaign nor Hillary did not start the birther movement, period, end of the story there. There was a volunteer coordinator, I believe, in late 2007, I think in December, one of our volunteer coordinators in one of the counties in Iowa. I don't recall whether they were an actual paid staffer, but they did forward an email that promoted the conspiracy.
The birther conspiracy?
Hillary made the decision immediately to let that person go. We let that person go. And it was so, beyond the pale, Wolf, and, so not worthy of the kind of campaign that certainly Hillary wanted to run, or that we as a staff wanted to run, that I called David Plouffe, who was obviously managing Barack Obama's campaign in 2007, to apologize and basically say that this was not coming from us. It was a rogue volunteer coordinator, and this was not the kind of campaign we wanted to run. And David very graciously accepted my apology.
So that's the what Donald Trump was originally referring to. Anything more on this? Because again, he brought up Sidney Blumenthal. Your response to that is
Sidney never worked for us, and Sidney,
he is very close to Secretary Clinton and was part of the foundation.
Yes. But he never worked for our campaign.
But his larger point is this: the idea of President Obama somehow being an other originated with Hillary Clinton's campaign. In fact, it was called the sleaziest moment of the campaign by a New York Times columnist when Hillary Clinton went on air and said Barack Obama is not a Muslim as far as I know. When Hillary Clinton's campaign circulated a picture of Barack Obama in native headdress. It was called by Barack Obama dirty tricks. So this idea that it started with the campaign is true.
Kaylee,
and I agree with Donald Trump when he said, let's move on and talk about ISIS and talk about jobs, because it does a disservice to the American people to linger on
He wants to
this.
continue to talk about
He
it.
doesn't.
David,
again, I feel like I have to bear personal witness to this. I was there. This was not a big effort that was launched by the Clinton campaign, but I also was there in the White House when Donald Trump pressed this issue for years after, even after the president released his birth certificate. But the bigger issue is, do you think it's profitable in a presidential debate for him to be getting into the weeds about Patty Solis-Doyle and Sidney Blumenthal and Rosie O'Donnell?
Right.
Because I don't.
Right.
Let's Kaylee respond.
I think he wants to move on from these issues. He said at the end, let's talk about ISIS, let's talk about jobs, but let's back up here. And what we saw tonight was a real person acting viscerally about things that happen. And what you saw on the other side was a scripted politician who, instead of being out on the campaign trail for 2 weeks shaking hands and talking to voters, was calculating her every single word we saw tonight. And I think Donald Trump
there are 320 million real people in America, but one of these
who would
people
all
is
do
going to be
better than our
president of the United
politicians, who would
States.
all do better than our all talk, no action, sounds good, doesn't work.
But let me just ask a question, though. Do you not, and I don't know the answer to this, as president, don't you want somebody who thinks very, very, very carefully about the words they say? Because as president, doesn't the words you say have global impact, potentially, you know, policy-changing impact around the world?
Sure, of course I want someone who thinks carefully, and I think Donald Trump does, but I think he reacts the way average people react. That being said, he created
do you want
a
an
$10
average
billion
person in the White House?
He created he's not an average person. He created a $10 billion brand, and he didn't do that by flying off the handle. He did that by negotiating very sensitive deals with world leaders. But he is a real person who understands blue-collar workers and the middle class far more than Hillary Clinton.
Okay, Jeffrey, we haven't heard from you.
All right. In terms of the Clinton campaign spreading rumors that Barack Obama was the other, I want to read the first line from a news story from the International Business Times. It says, a former personal aide to United States President Barack Obama said Monday that false rumors he was a Muslim were, quote, moved along, unquote, by Hillary Clinton staffers in 2008. And they're talking about Reggie Love.
Now, let me say, hey, here's the deal. What if I grant you that? What if I say you are...
You don't have to grant me, grant Reggie Love.
I will grant you. So what? Are you saying that Donald Trump is so feeble-minded that he has to follow the leadership of some nobody Clinton staffer? And spend 5 years?
Senator Obama accused Hillary Clinton personally of this.
Guys, nobody listens.
The bodyguard.
Guys, nobody listens.
He was his body man. He was the guy who carried his bags and stuff.
Yeah. So he says he was standing right there.
Okay, he was the campaign manager. Let's let him speak.
Let's not get carried away here. The fact of the matter is that Donald Trump carried this. He was the chief proponent of this argument for years until last week, and that's undeniable. I don't even think I agree with you guys. Let's move on, but I don't think he did himself a service tonight, and that's the point.
Overall.
I just think it was very exciting overall, Dana. I thought the outset was great. You know, you walk on, you don't know exactly what to expect. Based on all of the online polls, we did tremendously well.
We haven't had a real poll yet.
Well, I mean, but the online polls were fantastic. I mean, you get it. When hundreds of thousands of people are calling in and voting, and you have 80 and 90%, you sort of get it.
Anything that you wish you did differently?
No, I'm very happy that I was able to hold back on the on the indiscretions with respect to Bill Clinton, because I have a lot of respect for Chelsea Clinton, and I just didn't want to say what I was going to say, and which is I'll tell you maybe at the next debate. We'll see. But I'm very happy with the
what about her big moment that she clearly thought that she had in saying she was preparing for the debate just like she's preparing to be president?
Well, I think she'd be a poor president. I don't think she'd do the job. We need somebody that's going to really be able to do the job. She doesn't have what it takes to make America great again. But we'll see how it all goes. You see the polls. You see what's going on. You see how we're doing. We are going to make America great again. Our country is in such trouble, whether it's immigration, whether it's our jobs being taken, whether it's our factories closing up all over the country, whether it's our military that's been so sadly depleted.
Did it go how you thought it was going to go?
I think it went better than I ever thought.
Feel lost or something?
No, I loved it. I loved it.
Will you commit to the next debate?
Okay, so we've had a lot of people saying they think Trump did terribly. That's why I want to just hear from you. What is your perspective?
Right.
Oh, big picture.
Right out of the gate, he was after her on trade to the point he hit her so hard that she, started to flip-flop on all of this sort of thing. I was looking at now that, let me just add here, the Trump campaign put out a list of these tweets. But still in all, there are tweets from significant people in the Washington Post, the New York Times, et cetera, saying that they thought he was doing a terrific job here. My point to you is, number one, whatever we think about the birtherism thing, I genuinely do not believe people in America who are looking forward and are concerned about their health care, their jobs, taxes, et cetera, give a whit about
but overall, how do you think Donald Trump did versus Hillary?
I thought he was great. I thought he was great. And he particularly pursued the business of being the outsider, the rebellion against the standard politician.
Okay. Gloria?
Can I, on the birther issue, just one thing, is that it's the predicate upon which his political career was based for 5 years. He rode that issue to national celebrity after The Apprentice, and it was part of the issue that catapulted him. Secondly, on the tax issue, I think the problem he had is that when Hillary Clinton started talking about it as a bait and switch, not releasing your taxes, et cetera, and she made it very personal. She said that means 0 for troops, 0 for vets, 0 for schools, 0 for health care. And then he said, that makes me smart during the campaign, that he didn't pay his taxes. And then she said, well, what are you trying to hide? And I think that answer resonates with people who say, wait a minute, why am I a chump? I'm paying all this money for schools, vets, et cetera. And when you're president, it's different.
And there was a similar moment where I thought he made a tremendous mistake where where basically the stiffing of the vendors.
Right. Yeah.
That's business.
That's smart. That's business.
That's business. So he actually created 2 ads that you're going to see within 12 hours tonight, which I think was a big mistake. The other thing I thought that was very important, because we keep talking about him as if he was the only person there. Hillary Clinton did some stuff that was really good tonight. Can we just give her a little bit of credit? First of all, she wandered into the thicket of race and handled it really, really well. She talked about the criminal justice issues really well. She talked about, the private prison stuff you haven't heard on the stage for a national candidate ever, and she did handle that really well. Also, I think it was important that, to the extent that personality matters and that sort of stuff matters, you never saw her get so defensive, and that was a part of why I think she was able to just continue to carry forward. She was prepared and he was not.
Well, also, I'm curious to know, Van, your perspective on when Donald Trump, when the question was about improving, race issues in America, and Donald Trump talked about law and order. I'm wondering how that...
Before he got to law and order, he said that we all live in hell. Black people live in hell.
No, he said inner cities.
No, please.
No, he said, play it back. He said inner cities.
He said the question was about race. It wasn't about urban issues. It was about race, and he talks about black people living in hell. That's not good. But then he talks about this law and order thing, and he continues to praise and raise this question of stop and frisk. And I just want to end the mythology right now. That program actually was not effective. Burglaries did not go down. Robberies did not go down. What it did, and frankly, if all they had done was taking guns away from drug dealers, people would have probably been happy. What they did was they stopped thousands and thousands and thousands of innocent African Americans.
It was like roughly 90%, I think, of the people stopped were African American or people of color, and also had not done anything wrong.
A fraction of a percent had anything wrong. So what did that do? It actually created this ill will. And so then for him to say he wants more stop and frisk and he wants better relations does not go together. And I got to tell you, Donald Trump has botched an opportunity to reach out to the black community. The African-American community is willing to hear someone speak to us about our pain, but not in the way that he does it, the disrespectful way he does it.
What he said tonight was very effective, which is you're going to hear this kind of talk this time of year because guess what? It's an election year, and you're going to hear from Hillary Clinton all of these promises, the same promises she's been making for 30 years that failed to materialize. That was a very effective line. She's had 30 years. She's talking the sweet talk now, but where are the actions that follow up on the talk?
At the outset of the night, I said I wondered which of the Donald Trumps we would see. He who stood on the stage with the Mexican president and seemed presidential, seemed as if he were an individual of stature, or the individual who later that night was in Phoenix at a rally and was vintage Trump. And I think she predetermined which of the Trumps we received tonight, because very early on she used the words trumped up. She then said that he rooted for the housing crisis, and she said that he got a loan from his dad, all within the first 10 or so minutes, at a point where he had stressed the fact that he was calling her Secretary Clinton. And at a certain point, I just think that she pushed his buttons and caused him to become the individual he didn't want to become, and the split screen was not to his satisfaction.
But the thing that I find, if I can make a kind of prosaic political consultant point, all of this was predictable. We heard Jeffrey talk about that exchange between Ronald Reagan and Walter Mondale in 1984 when there were questions about Reagan's his age and his capacities, and he had that line about, I'm not going to take advantage of my opponent's relative youth and inexperience. That was anticipated. He knew that was an issue, and he prepared for it. Everyone knew some of these issues were going to come up. Right. And yet, Donald Trump wasn't prepared for it. It's inexplicable to me. It's malpractice, and you should stop. I think Ronald Reagan was one of the great practitioners of all time, so we shouldn't denigrate him by comparing his performance to Donald Trump.
Let me just call to your attention here, everybody. The 1980 Carter-Reagan debate in Cleveland. I'm looking at the paper the day after from the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Carter and Reagan trade punches, but both on their feet at the bell. Each candidate leaves the ring without errors. Shortly thereafter, the polls went up for Ronald Reagan because the American people thought he won it. So
I'm probably one of the only other person on this platform who's old enough to remember it, as you are. His numbers went up because there was a question about Ronald Reagan. Is he too extreme? Is he dangerous? And with his performance, he assuaged people's concerns about him. Donald Trump had that opportunity tonight, and he missed the opportunity.
David, but my point is the media reaction was that it was a draw, or that in some cases I looked at that Carter had won. And it turned out to be the other way.
And we could listen. We've been wrong about Donald Trump.
That's what I'm trying to flag.
But I mean, I honestly, I believe as I look at these polls and I look at the people who he has yet to persuade, the thing that has been holding them back is, does he have the temperament and does he have the mastery of basic substance to be president?
I think it was interesting raising the stamina issue when she didn't take a drink of water the entire 90 minutes. I was drinking a couple of bottles of water, as was he.
He was sniffling. Here's the deal. He raised the stamina.
No, he did. The host, the moderator did. He didn't raise it.
Well, he has raised it time and time again.
He was asked a question.
He fell for it, and he talked about stamina. And he didn't talk about the looks, which was, probably smart for him not to, since that was offensive. He talked about stamina. He was sniffling. He was drinking water. He seemed like he needed a nap near the end. He faded near the end. Now, Jeffrey and Kayla, you are correct. Most people probably only watch the first 20 or 30 minutes. And in those first 20 or 30 minutes, he was very effective. He was very good on the trade stuff. That is a big weak spot for her. It's a big pain point in our party, and he was great. But he got tricked off into this weird, bizarre stuff where he just basically, I think, lost his way. Let me just say one more thing. It was very important for her to raise gender. It was important that she raised it the way that she raised it. And I think it was important for her to raise the fact that not only does he say insulting things to women, he says insulting things to women of color. And I thought that was well raised.
And I love the way that she used his words to say those things about women. She didn't, she used his words exactly. And that was very successful for her on the campaign trail when she did that foreign policy speech. And she just laid out everything that he has said. And she did that tonight. I think really the bottom line is qualifications, experience, and preparations matter. And it really matters when you're running for president. And I think that's what we saw tonight. And I loved her line when she said, Yes, I did prepare for this debate, and I also prepared to be president of the United States. That was
the one thing that I wish she had done that she didn't.
Is very important. I think it's a very, very important thing to discuss. But I think it went very well.
Sir, there was some confusion about how you answered the question about paying taxes. You have paid some federal taxes over the years.
I hate the way our government spends our money. Our government takes our money and they throw it out the window, whether it's in the Middle East or wherever. But I hate the way our government spends our money.
But you have paid federal taxes.
Of course I pay federal taxes.
Mr. Trump, after this experience, any doubt that you'll participate in the next two presidential debates?
No, this was a great experience for me. I really enjoyed it. I think we got our point across. She's not going to make America great again. You know, the one thing I see, and I saw even more than I ever thought I would see, is that she has been saying these things for years, and nothing ever happens. They never get fixed. It's all talk, no action. You know, it's like just all talk. And she's been saying the things we've been discussing and discussed up on the dais. She has been saying this for years. And all it is talk. It never happens. And to me, that's very
Any regrets in saying when you refer to the president as your president as opposed to the nation? There's been some Twitter reactions that you said your president as opposed to the nation.
Well, he's everybody's president. He's the president, so he's everybody's president.
Mr. Trump, any estimate on your federal taxes?
I think we've lost him on mic, so let's go back to David.
What I was saying is that I wish she had in places invoked the stories of real people to animate the point she was making. She speaks sometimes in policy terms.
It was interesting, though, the specific stories she told about her father, which she then brought back in to try to use against Donald
she
Trump.
did. And she mentioned her granddaughter at the beginning. But all of these problems that she was talking about tonight have human faces across this country. And she's met these people, and they've undoubtedly touched her. And she could have done a better job of bringing them into the discussion.
I do think, you know, one of the criticisms of Hillary Clinton in August particularly was that she let Trump be Trump too much and wasn't more assertive. And I did think you're right. At times, she could have been more assertive. She could have gotten in there more, told these stories. It seemed like she was listening to Paul Begala. She mentioned her granddaughter. She mentioned her own father as well. I did think the anecdote at the end about the Latina woman who Donald Trump named Mrs. Housekeeper, that is something that I'd never heard and is disturbing. And I think the birther thing, to go back to that, I think the problem with the birther thing, it isn't that it hurts black people's feelings. It's that it proves to certain people that Donald Trump was willing to embrace a racist conspiracy theory to advance his own political agenda. And that has all sorts of implications about how he would govern and how he would frame issues. That's the real problem with it, and she got at that.
Except, of course, this charge having been raised against 5 white guys, including one sitting president, and all of them Republicans, it's not a racist theory. It's just a crazy theory, maybe. I mean, I thought Barack Obama was born in Hawaii, but lots of Democrats in 1881 were saying Chester Alan Arthur was born in Canada. Lots of people. The New York Times ran a story in February 28th.
So if you guys always say that, there you go again.
Well, but Van, it's about equality of treatment. It's about equality of treatment for presidents and presidential
Somebody
candidates.
should stand up for Chester A. Arthur.
Let Van respond.
Exactly.
Listen, I first of all, I did not know any of the things that you said until you started educating the country about these other instances. And there's a reason for that. Because it didn't actually matter in those days the way that it matters now. Context matters. The same thing you do 100 years from now, if you do it today, it lands differently. And I think that you know in your heart that the way that this was received and the way that it was driven had racial implications. And here's what I love about you. You give us these history lessons, but part of what you often do is you try to normalize things that actually are abnormal. And in this situation, the way this president was treated on this issue was abnormal. And for somebody to spend 5 years on it after the birth certificate the birth certificate was produced 5 years ago, and he's still on it.
Van, have you heard about Ted Cruz and Donald Trump questioning his eligibility? This was not. He asked a question of a politician, which every citizen has the right to do, and Donald Trump did it. He got the answer. He moved on.
So the black guy and the Latino.
I think we are all overlooking one of the key moments of tonight's. We are all overlooking one of the key moments of tonight's debate when we saw the prosecution of a politician live before our eyes. When Donald Trump pushed Hillary Clinton to the point of basically having to admit, yes, I am for NATO, despite standing up here and saying I'm against trade deals. I did call it the gold standard, despite now saying I'm against TPP. I did call South Korea a great trade deal, and now I'm against all of this. So we saw the prosecution of a politician that will play over well with citizens.
Breonna Keeler standing by. Breonna?
Hi there, I'm here
here with John Podesta, the chairman of Hillary Clinton's campaign. And John, very clearly, you feel confident that Hillary Clinton won this debate. But I also wonder, what are you planning on seizing on when it comes to what Donald Trump said tonight?
Well, first of all, Brianna, I think that he came unprepared. He had no real plans for the future. I think the debate on the economy was all ours. I think that she laid out very clear plans about an economy that was built, that focused on the middle class, building the middle class, creating good jobs, creating the support that families need, like child care and paid family leave. And I think he had nothing to say about it. So I think we want to keep running at that. And I think he dug himself deeper by repeating untruths and falsehoods.
Specifically, which one? Which one? If you're cutting an ad, what are you grabbing?
Well, he did. I mean, the fact that he supported the Iraq War at the beginning has been fact-checked 1,000 times, and he keeps telling lies about that. He was dissembling in his approach. I think his explanation of why he wouldn't release his tax returns was a low moment for him, and I think people want to know what is he hiding in those tax returns, and I think we'll continue to press that issue. But mostly we want to talk to the American people about improving their lives, and I thought that's the place where there was really a tremendous difference. She had something to say, and he had really nothing to say. He was running down the country, but he didn't really have anything to say about how he's going to improve people's lives.
Donald Trump has repeatedly said, and to some effect during this debate, Hillary Clinton's been in public service for years and years. He repeated this over and over. Polls show voters want change. He was making the case that she's not a candidate of change. Are you worried voters agree with him?
In January, voters are going to get change. There will be a new president in the White House. The question is, what kind of change do we have? Do we want to go back to trickle-down economics, where all the tax breaks go to the wealthy and the middle class gets left in the dust, as they did in the Great Recession? Do we want to go back to punishing women for exercising the reproductive rights? That's the kind of change he's promising. I don't think people want that. I think she's promising positive change to get the economy working for the middle class, to deal with the pressing problems that the country's facing. And when it came, I think, to the elements on national security, there was one person who looked like they could assume the role of commander-in-chief, and that was not Donald Trump.
All right, John Podesta, thank you so much. Anderson, back to you.
All right, Brianna, thanks very much. We want to play a number of some of the key moments from this debate tonight. We're obviously going to replay the debate, I think, at 1 a.m. But let's play the discussion they had about judgment.
I think my strongest asset, maybe by far, is my temperament. I have a winning temperament. I know how to win. She does not know how to win.
Clinton.
Wait, the AFL-CIO the other day, behind the blue screen, I don't know who you were talking to, Secretary Clinton, but you were totally out of control. I said, there's a person with a temperament that's got a problem.
Secretary Clinton.
Woo, okay.
Do you think, I mean, it was interesting to see them both in split screen. Do you think, I mean, clearly Secretary Clinton maybe is more used to being in a split screen, used to be on camera all the time, but she certainly seemed to respond differently than Donald Trump did in their split screen. Did you see that?
Of course she did, because she spent 2 weeks a month away from the American people practicing at a podium in her house in Chappaqua. Instead of talking to the people, that's what she was doing. So what you saw tonight was a perfect mannequin politician, as good as they come, versus a real American citizen who took advantage of the American dream, built a $10 billion brand, and has a proven track record of success. There was a clear differentiation.
I do think it was interesting how the first time Secretary Clinton kind of poked him on inheriting, I don't know, $14 million from his father or whatever it is, that clearly bothered him, and he actually went back to it. Did it surprise you, Van, that he was so ensnared in every detail that she would bring up? Because it seemed like such an obvious attempt on her part to do that, and it seemed to work every time.
Well, listen, Donald Trump's great strength when he's on is his ability to stay connected to the American people, to be right there with their pain, their frustration, sometimes to bring out the dark part of it, to be right there. What she was able to do was to bait him into worrying about himself. And when he does that, for some people, I think it's great because but for most people, he's losing the plot and he's losing the country. And that's what I think, that last part, he was great at the beginning, but he faded because of that.
The big picture question, and I love analyzing every one of these answers like everybody else, but take a step back and ask yourself, who grew the tent tonight? I don't think he lost any support. I just don't see where he gained anything. I think she stands the prospect of having gained because of that split screen, because she did probably practice, rehearse, and looked more presidential than he, because he was volatile in those moments. He was trying to explain that he had the temperament, and yet his volatility kept rising.
I don't think... Note to debate preppers for next debate if he preps. Don't get peevish about your temperament.
Right. But I also think if you take a step back, when I was listening to him, I kept thinking that he sounded more like a real estate guy sometimes when he said, oh, my friends say 650 million in leveraged debt is not a lot, and talked about Mar-a-Lago in terms of just, integrating the golf club. But talked about it in terms of the wealthy circles in which he inhabits, rather than a potential president of the United States where you have to kind of leave your real estate hat. Oh, maybe I didn't pay taxes because, real estate taxes you can fiddle with, and that was smart of me, and take it to a presidential level which is where Hillary Clinton was when she said no health care, no veterans benefits. You didn't support all of that. I don't think that transition was
certainly
obvious
Secretary
at all.
Clinton was trying to talk to middle-class voters out there. I mean, she repeatedly went back to that, talked about, I think the term she was trying to get in the vernacular is trumped up, trickle down, which I'm not sure that's going to catch fire or not.
You could have done without that.
Right, she tried it twice, and I think it... But I mean, he didn't really seem to... He mentioned the middle class, I think, a handful of times, but he didn't really make a concerted effort,
I don't think he did. And he also, I think, I think going in, he was someone who understood television better and was someone who's surrounded by people who understand television, like Roger Ailes, but he didn't connect, right? He looked peevish. He was looking away from the camera. He didn't have any stories. Kayla, you say he's been all around the country meeting people and shaking hands. Well, it didn't seem like that. It seemed like he was on stage by himself, defending his business record, defending birtherism, not talking about the pain and the stories of Americans that he's met, apparently.
Although there were some moments, and I think we have to give him his due, there were some moments on which he, I think, did connect because there are a lot of people out there who feel economic frustrations, and he articulated them. Those moments were few and far between.
Let's go, let's check back in with Wolf. We'll have more from our panel and more key moments from the debate ahead. Wolf?
All right, Anderson, both Trump and Clinton clearly were vying for undecided voters in this election. So how did they do? We have a group of undecided voters in the key battleground state of Florida. They've been watching the debate. Let's get right to Pamela Brown. She's in Orlando, Florida for us. Pamela, these voters tell you there's a clear winner tonight. What do they say?
That's right. And they say that the clear winner is Hillary Clinton. 18 out of the 20 undecided voters here in this key battleground state of Florida say Hillary Clinton won, 2 for Donald Trump. So I want to just show the crowd here and just get a word or a phrase and how you would describe Hillary Clinton's performance tonight.
She was very prepared.
Even-keeled.
Measured.
Knowledgeable.
Promising.
Predictable.
So you actually think Donald Trump won the debate? You thought that he had the better performance. Why is that?
Well, it's not that he won the debate, but he did what I expected him to do. And Hillary didn't answer any of the questions I have about her, any of the really things that I see as troubling as far as voting for her. Whereas I know what I know about Trump, and it did.
So before this debate, we were talking, and you actually were leaning more toward Donald Trump, but now you're leaning toward Hillary Clinton. Why is that?
I think she, like I said, she was very well prepared. Her attitude seemed to be more in the charismatic side. She took more control of the situation, so I felt that she owned this debate compared to what Donald Trump has done in the past, and he doesn't seem to be solid in what his material. So I feel that this time around, she was, she just pretty much had solid information compared to what she's had in the past.
And I want to go to a Bernie Sanders supporter here, undecided voter. You wanted to come in here today and hear a populist message during the debate. Did you hear that?
No, I didn't. I felt that's what Donald Trump needed to do to pick up millennial Bernie supporters, at least, was to come across as very, for the people. I wanted to hear more talk about campaign finance reform, which neither of the candidates touched on, which was really disappointing to me. I feel Hillary Clinton did better in getting a more progressive message across with talking about clean energy and health care and affordable college, but it wasn't enough for me.
And Cheryl, you really wanted to hear about the issues tonight. You wanted to learn from these candidates what they're going to do for you. Did you hear what you wanted to hear?
No. I was very disappointed. I don't know what either one of them plans to do towards medical costs, which are a huge concern in my life right now. Things that affect the single parents.
All right. So, Wolf, overall, in this group of 20 undecided voters, they feel like Hillary Clinton performed better. She did have more high moments compared to Donald Trump. Back to you, Wolf.
I want to narrow in on one part of this debate that was a deciding factor for these voters. We measured their reactions as the candidates spoke. Before we show you that moment, please take a look at the bottom of your screen. Men's responses are in green, women in orange. When the lines go up, that means this group liked what it heard. If lines go down, that means the group didn't like a candidate's answer. Now take a look at that moment. Watch this.
I also have a much better temperament than she has. I have a much better. She spent, let me tell you, she spent hundreds of millions of dollars on an advertising. They get Madison Avenue into a room, they put names. Oh, temperament, let's go after. I think my strongest asset, maybe by far, is my temperament. I have a winning temperament. I know how to win. She does not know how to win.
Clinton.
Wait, the AFL-CIO the other day, behind the blue screen, I don't know who you were talking to, Secretary Clinton, but you were totally out of control. I said, there's a person with a temperament that's got a problem.
All right, Pamela, what about that moment? What about that moment that they didn't like?
I was watching the focus group here at the University of Central Florida during that moment, and a lot of you guys sort of laughed or shrugged, and I want to know why that was when Donald Trump said that he believes his strongest asset is temperament. Why did you react that way?
Because his temperament is horrible. I mean, all that he likes to do is just badmouth his opponent. What's he going to do in a situation where, say, a foreign government does something that he doesn't like? Is he just going to go and push the button?
But you actually thought that Donald Trump won this debate.
Well, I'd like to think that he did, because I think that he needs to bring a change to what we've been going through for the last 8 years, and maybe even before that. It's so political. I think we need to get away from the politics and get more into running a country as defensible entity that it is, and be a world leader, because if we're not the leader, someone else is going to take over. And so we need to step up and do the job.
All right, so a mix of opinions here with this group. And some in this group have actually decided, after watching this debate, who they're going to vote for come November. You'll find out about that coming up. Wolf?
All right.
Trade deals, immigration, etc. But when he spends the time litigating his taxes, litigating whether or not the ads being run against him are fair, it's not surprising that wouldn't resonate with a bunch of undecided voters in the all-important I-4 corridor in the battleground state of Florida. That's not what they care about. They care about jobs. You heard about some of them talking about there wasn't enough about rising health care costs. That's not a slam on Lester Holt, who brought a lot of issues, but you can't talk about everything in 98 minutes. If he's taking advice from his advisors, he will be told, I am quite certain, focus on them. Do not try to defend yourself.
Yeah. And, Dana, 18 out of 20, that's a pretty impressive number, thought that she did a better job than he did.
It certainly is impressive. And the thing that I find fascinating, to your point, Jake, is that my understanding is that was a big part of Donald Trump's focus in his unconventional debate prep, sitting around the table, talking about policy, talking about approach and strategy to this debate, meaning to stay on offense, to stay on the things that he wants to talk about. And he did start to go there on, she's just a politician. She's not anybody who has...
Hold on for one moment,
Okay.
because David Chalian is with us, our political director. You've got the results of our poll that was taken as in the aftermath of this debate.
I do, and we've done this before, so let me just give a few cautionary notes about the poll, okay? It is a poll of debate watchers. And so in our sample, this is a more Clinton-friendly audience. Those that tuned in tonight was a more Clinton-friendly audience. So let me give an example of this. This can't reflect the views of all Americans. It's just the views of a sample of people that watched the debate. This sample of debate watchers in this poll is 41% Democratic, 26% Republican. That is about 10 points more Democratic and 2 points less Republican than our typical national polls when we do the regular telephone survey of the country. So this definitely skews Democratic, more Democratic than a normal poll, and it skews to a Hillary Clinton audience. So keep that in mind as we now will reveal to you who won the debate according to this audience. Overwhelmingly, Hillary Clinton. 62% of Americans, those that watched the debate tonight in this audience, said Hillary Clinton won, compared to 27% who said Trump won. Again, this is of debate watchers, and our sample definitely is more Democratic than a normal poll, but that is an overwhelming victory among these debate watchers we polled for Hillary Clinton.
It certainly is, but you've got some caveats there. But there was a huge audience. We don't know how many people were watching. There were some estimates, maybe as many as 100 million were watching. That's a pretty big sample.
Well, I mean, if indeed that is the audience, there's no doubt about it. I mean, this sample of this poll is 521 registered voters who watched the debate tonight. So we've got a margin of error of about 4.5 points in there. But again, it's just that, just like when we saw in the Democratic convention, more Democrats watched the Democratic convention, more Republicans watched the Republican convention. This sample of debate watchers skewed more Democratic, and perhaps that is representative of overall who watched the debate tonight.
Your reaction, Jake?
Well, I mean, I think that probably a lot of Hillary Clinton supporters felt really good about this, about the performance tonight, and I wouldn't be surprised if many Trump supporters liked what they saw. We heard Kayleigh McEnany and others who support Donald Trump saying he prosecuted the case against a career politician, and he spoke his mind, and he fought for himself, and he defended himself. What I'm wondering about, though, is the undecided voters. We have a large number a large percentage of voters, according to polls, who are either undecided or right now, or at least earlier tonight, were thinking of supporting one of the third-party candidates, either Gary Johnson, the Libertarian, or Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate. My question is, how do they feel? We heard from a voter in that focus group that Pamela has, who sounded to me completely superficially, and it's a huge generalization, but sounded to me kind of like a Green Party supporter. She was talking about, they didn't talk about campaign finance. That was very disappointing. I'm not surprised that she didn't hear what she wanted to hear, and she still seemed kind of undecided. But what I am wondering about is all those undecided voters, the 18 out of 20 who said that they liked what Hillary Clinton had to say, because she was talking about them.
And that's really not only important to find out for us, because that's an important demographic, but it's because that is the demographic that Hillary Clinton's campaign has been suffering the biggest with, the sort of underpinning of the Obama coalition. The Clinton campaign has been saying pretty candidly that millennials are the ones who they have to get back in the fold, and they haven't been that successful. So if this debate helps with that, that is going to be a huge, huge win for them. Even zeroing in that tightly on one demographic.
Dana, you just spoke with Donald Trump. He was walking around the spin room behind us. He thought he did great in that debate. Isn't that what he told you?
He did. I think he did great. At least that's what he said. And he said he expected to win the online polls. We'll see what he says about that. But the thing about him is that the fact that he was here behind us in this spin room is, I think it's unprecedented. We were used to it.
For a general election.
Exactly. Yeah. We were used to it in the primary debates for him and other candidates to come out and talk, although I don't believe Hillary Clinton never did. But for him to come out and be his own spinner is kind of remarkable. And it is just a reminder that he is his best arguer. He is his best representative. There's nobody who does it better than him. Watching him trailed by the people who were supposed to be the spinners in here, the people who run his campaign, his children, other people who normally would be the people who would kind of try to explain the parameters of what happened and try to set the tone going forward. It was him.
No.
But I will say that, I mean, the other interpretation of it, other than he is his best advocate, is that he didn't get his message out sufficiently in the 98 minutes of debate, and so he came here to re-prosecute the case. And, in fact, you heard him more on message back here talking about Hillary Clinton's been there 30 years. She can't solve our problems. I can solve our problems. We need fresh thinking. You heard him say that more here in the spin room than you did in the last 60 minutes of debate.
That is true. But he was planning on coming here even before the debate started.
Interesting.
But probably because he knew he had to put a button on everything he was saying.
David, I've been coming to these spin rooms after these presidential debates for a while. I don't remember when a presidential nominee, I remember a lot of their top aides, their surrogates, other effective spokesmen, spokeswomen coming into the spin room to spin. That's why we call it, to explain why their candidate did such a great job. Do you remember when an actual nominee came in and tried to make the case?
Not in the general election setting. I can't remember that, because it is usually the candidates take the 90 minutes or so on stage to do their best to set the narrative after the debate. Then they leave it to their aides to try to enforce the desired narrative that they want. But you know, Donald Trump, I wasn't terribly surprised that he did this. It's part of actually the whole performance that he had this evening. All this conversation in advance of which Donald Trump would show up. The very same Donald Trump that we've been watching running for president for the last year is the one that showed up, did what he did during the primaries, came in here to make the case for him. I just didn't see any adjustment in what he's been doing, because he really believes, obviously it's been working. He entered tonight in the tied race.
Except to say that he was, I mean, when you look, we saw clips earlier tonight of him during some of the Republican primary debates, and when he was calling his rivals choke artists, and he was calling his rivals basket case and little Marco and this and that, he was much more restrained that way. And I think he made an allusion to how he was going to bring up some of the Clintons' marital difficulties, but he didn't bring it up because
he just said that to me here in this
because Chelsea Clinton was there. So there was some restraint. I'm not saying that anybody should be like, you know,
but he also said he giving it the next time,
giving him an award for
allusion to Dana, so that now everybody's like, well, what were you going to say?
Exactly.
About it? I mean, that was just playing the media on that, right? Like dangling it out there in the way that Trump does.
Well, when he tweeted the other day he was going to invite Jennifer Flowers to sit in the front row, he was sort of dangling it in that way as well. But he did offer a good tease for the next presidential debate. Just wait, see what I say at the next president. Were you surprised that Hillary Clinton waited till the very end to really go after him on the whole women issue?
No. I mean, yes, I'm surprised that she waited until the end. But again, I'm surprised that he wasn't better prepared for it instead of defending the fact that he said really obnoxious things to Rosie O'Donnell, because look, there are tens of millions of Americans who love Rosie O'Donnell, so it's not like everyone agrees with him that that's acceptable. That's not the correct answer is, I was in the entertainment world and I said silly things, but let's talk about let's talk about what's better for women, you or me, and here are the ways I will bring women jobs. I will bring women this. I will bring them.
My suspicion is that was the way he prepared. It just didn't come out that way. He took the bait.
All right, guys, coming up, we'll have more results of our exclusive instant poll. Debate watchers weigh in on who would better handle the economy. We'll also have reality checks on some of the most controversial claims tonight. Stay with us.
Golf teaches us so many life lessons.